What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with a super brief intro before we get into a mega podcast. Mike Brown, the head coach of the Sacramento Kings, was fired about 90 minutes after Grant and I finished recording this 2-hour plus pod on should these NBA players be traded, focusing on guys where the conversation is a little bit more uncomfortable and maybe they're not as involved in the rumor mill. We talk about the Sacramento Kings and other players for I think like 10 to 15 minutes. The Mike Brown firing changes absolutely nothing about what we said. If anything, it might make it even more germane, but wanted to give you a heads up for that. And now it's just on the onus of this was the easy switch for the Kings to make. I don't think Mike Brown has been optimizing their roster, but I also think that what's going on with them also really is a personnel issue, at least to some large extent. We'll have further thoughts on that in a few days, but just wanted to give you that little note before we get started. I now leave you with 2+ hours of should these NBA players be traded at the 2025 deadline chit chat with the one and only Mr. Grant Hughes. What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you as always with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We're having, I guess, difficult, awkward conversations related to the NBA trade deadline this podcast, where go check out our trade deadline big board where we kind of ranked our most valuable players who were most likely to get traded or embroiled in the rumor mill. And now, with one exception, because the rumor mill has gone haywire since we recorded that, we're asking, we're not necessarily, we might endorse some of them, but we're asking, why aren't these guys more widely available or being talked about? And should they be available? That is going to be the structure of this episode. First and foremost, though, the question everyone wants answered, Mr. Grant Hughes, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. How are you doing this fine couple days post Christmas morning for me, afternoon
than the Sacramento Kings, tell you that much.
Did you see? I mean, we're not going to start there, are we? Because there's so much to talk about, and we haven't really. Well, you've talked about them, but I haven't really talked much about them.
No, we will get to the Kings, but this is going to be done. We're gonna flirt with some alphabetical order this time, so the Sacramento Kings related stuff will come up closer to the end.
Just before we jump in, like, what percentage of the names we're going to mention that almost across the board have not been discussed in trades by the deadline will we see credible to semi-credible rumors involving them? Because I think it's a high percentage.
Yeah, I think if we filter out, so let's just remove the Kings from the equation, I think probably like 30% of these guys there'll be rumors about. And as of right now, the way we approach this was just some of these names have been mentioned to where it's, I mean, we're going to begin with the Hawks where it's, oh, everyone's talked about DeAndre Hunter, but this isn't like years past where it's, oh, the Hawks might, no, we've heard about Clint Capella. Like we haven't actually heard anything about, oh, the Hawks are looking to move DeAndre Hunter. Maybe we won't, but that's a good question. But I would think like a third of these guys will end up in credible rumors.
And I think, like, cynically, we can't talk about the same 3 or 4 guys for another month plus. Like, the rumor mill is going to need to be populated by speculative, like, other additions that seem speculative now. But like, we can't keep talking about Jimmy Butler and Zach LaVine and just like this, Brandon Ingram, this same like tiny group that we've been talking about for 6 months, probably. Like that. That's the other thing is the group of guys that are real trade candidates that, high end. It's like, it feels smaller than it's been in a long time. Like it just felt like there used to be more.
Doesn't it feel a little bit wider than it did last year though? Because where it was just Siakam, Anunoby, and that was it. Because the Harden was traded so early. I don't remember there being any. What was the high-end name speculation last year?
I don't remember last week, Dan. So I don't know. I really can't remember who was a serious trade candidate last year. Good point though. I guess if I can't remember, then it must not have been that size.
Look, we're giving content to the people who are now, and I don't actually. A lot of people troll these people. I actually feel bad, but the people who aggregate speculation as rumor. So listen to the HardwoodKnocks podcast. We're giving you free content. That every time I write anything resembling not even a fake trade at Bleacher Report, but just about like, oh, should this team move this player? It's NBA rumors. Charlotte Hornets should consider trading Brandon Miller or something. It's like, oh, I didn't actually write about Brandon Miller, but
they'll be even like a step farther. It'll be like NBA rumors. Insider predicts Zach or so and so team player X to team Y, and it's like I was just making up a fake trade. Like there's no reporting on this at all.
there's also seems like at not ESPN or Bleacher Report and like not even CBS Sports or The Ringer, but like some of these whatever tier sites you put them into, this might show that the NBA is in trouble when it comes to not marketing players properly. Is that how many times are you going to just come up with fake LeBron James or Steph Curry trades because like those are the names that draw attention where it's, oh, these guys, NBA Insider predicts this, or this should be, here's how the Boston Celtics can acquire LeBron James, like kind of the thumbnail version of just like the clickbait stuff. And so we're still just focusing on these guys who are in their late 30s
Right.
because Anthony Edwards isn't good enough to be the face of the league. What's going on with American basketball, Grant?
Big trouble. Big trouble.
We begin with the Atlanta Hawks. First name on here, Grant. Why isn't Trae Young a trade candidate all of a sudden after he was in the speculative fashion last year? That was a name where it was, oh, the Hawks should shop Trae Young. What is because that conversation was happening when they already gave away their first round picks. So what has changed that Trae Young's name isn't being bandied about? And do you think that his name should be being bandied about?
That's a great place to start. And I definitely much more than you in the past have been of the mind that like, you can't, it's not going to work. You can't build a real winner around him because of leadership, because of no defense, because of style of play. And it is like, I haven't really thought of him at all as a trade candidate this season. Plenty of other Hawks have, and we'll discuss them. Is it because, I don't know, answer your question with a question or just with some spitballing theories? Like, is it because he just, because of the pick situation, which means like it's San Antonio or the trade doesn't make sense. So it's just like, well, it's not going to be San Antonio apparently. So we're not going to see it. Or is it because the Hawks are like kind of fun and have a young core that also includes a number 1 overall pick that like it's probably not their fourth most exciting prospect, maybe third. I guess he's probably their third most exciting prospect. Is it just like, it doesn't seem as bleak in Atlanta as it did, or it seems renewed or fresher because of those young guys? So we're not scrambling for a reset. I think all that's kind of in play, but that's a great point. He has not been discussed almost at all in this trade cycle.
Do you think he should be?
I'm less convinced than I used to be because I kind of like the shape of the younger group around him with Daniels, with Jalen Johnson. They're obviously committed to Johnson on a new deal. Risacher will be what he is and probably won't be a helpful player for at least another couple years. But Capella is going to come off the books suddenly. Like I don't know. I think maybe it's just, I like the roster around him more and it doesn't feel like it needs to be Trae and some like stock supporting pieces. Maybe, I don't know. I think that's probably part of it. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like he's not out there and that he should be, or because you were never,
no, I don't think I thought they should have kept him because
Yeah.
I just said, well, I still believe this. Maybe it's changed because you've seen Atlanta like build about a league average defense, and they've, depending on what split you use, might be a little bit better than league average for stretches at a time. Maybe that's going to make some people feel better about giving up more for him. But you've already traded away control over this year's first round pick, a swap next year, and then in 2027. I don't think you're gonna. Now, if the Spurs are willing to give you back your own picks, that's the conversation to have. But we know that's not going to happen, and so I definitely think the roster is more intriguing because look, Jalen Johnson improved again, and then you have Risacher, you have Dyson Daniels. I think I'm just more open to like, all right, the Hawks feel not necessarily more financially flexible, but functionally flexible because of Daniels and Risacher specifically, and by getting rid of DeJounte Murray, like that did rebalance some of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I will, however, say I would like, should they be just content to be where they are then though? Because if you're going to look at it and say, well, we shouldn't be sellers because we owe our picks, then shouldn't you be buyers? I'm not saying go out and trade for Jimmy Butler, although they were a team that I thought would be an interesting Butler destination depending on the cost. I just like, are you just content to stay where you are then and send away like what could end up being the number 15 pick or whatever it is?
Well, it's a weird thing too, because if they were to be sellers, you could sort of be half of a seller, or not at all, because you could trade. I mean, Capella's deal is expiring. DeAndre Hunter, someone we'll probably talk about, Bogdanovich, all these guys should have appeal to teams that would be maybe looking to give you back draft equity, right? Or, because winners would want any of those three guys to be maybe not starters, but like rotation pieces. Although you could imagine all three of Capella, Bogdanovich, and Hunter starting on a good team. Like that's not, out of the realm of possibility. So like they could be sellers. But they're, as we're looking at it today, half a game out of sixth and that's trailing the Heat and the Bucks and the Magic. They're within 3 games of all of those teams. Like, so why aren't they like if they're buyers, what do they even go buy? Like, they're just in a weird middle spot, right?
I think it ends with them just trading for like a backup point guard type player, and then just kind of rolling forward.
Yeah. And they might not have even done that or be positioned to do that if Kobe Buffkin had been any good or stayed healthy. Like they might just be a total stand pat team otherwise.
Well, that's not going to be good for this teams who want this next name that's on our board. But DeAndre Hunter, we're not that far removed from, at least anecdotally, when I would write about, I thought teams should take a flyer on DeAndre Hunter at last year's trade deadline when it seemed like he was more available. Everyone cited the contract. And now he has 2 years and about $48 million left. And it just doesn't feel all that steep because he's had one hell of a season. There's always going to be the injury risk there, but he's not a name. We've seen trades proposed for Bogdanovich, even though he hasn't really been in the rumor mill. And then we have reporting that backs up that they want to move Clint Capella, which I just find, you said it, he's on an expiring contract, but like for what? So are you committed to now? Do you just think you're not going to be that much worse without him? Where do you land on DeAndre Hunter? Should he be available? I think, and by this, I don't mean very few players are untouchable, but should they actively be looking to move on from DeAndre Hunter?
So he's an example of like the argument you make could cut either way. Because my first thought is, yeah, he should be available because this is the best he's ever played. And if you don't believe that this is the new status quo for him, which is averaging over 20, making 44% of his threes, just like playing, like it just looks like a great starting caliber forward, like, or wing. We still can't hammer out what the difference is between forwards and wings. And if you're concerned about the injuries, which are like a real thing, that's probably the biggest concern I would say. And that's probably why, if you really believe in him, you would probably cite, he just hasn't been able to get healthy, stay healthy. He could have been this good all along. So, but if this is how good he is, then why are you trading this guy? Because he's on a great contract. You know, I don't know which way that cuts. I would be inclined if Risacher had looked a little better, like if he had been performing at a level where you could really say, like, by next year, we're okay with him as like a plus starter or rotation piece, which he just isn't right now. I think you'd be more inclined to trade him. But because Risacher kind of looks like a guy that would be taken 10th or 15th in a normal draft, maybe you just need Hunter and he will be your starter by season's end, or certainly next year if Risacher just doesn't look like a guy.
I normally would say that he should be available, but I still think that the contract, because of his track record, especially when it comes to availability, I don't know that it nets you even like a good first. If I'm running a team, I would give up a good first for DeAndre Hunter. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
I don't think around the NBA he's viewed in that vein. I normally would still say he should be available because you have Risacher, you have Jalen Johnson, and you have Dyson Daniels. And because of the makeup of your roster, there's no pathway to really ever playing them together. And by the way, those 4, they've played a whopping 1 possession together this season, Grant. However, the Hawks have, for now, are balancing it out with, well, Hunter looks great off the bench, and they'll close with him over Risacher, and that's just how you balance it out. And maybe if Risacher gets so good, that's when it becomes more of an issue, but that is then a great problem to have. Either way, though, it's not a problem they have right now, and there'll be other players that I will campaign should be available for, not campaign specifically, but I will campaign for them to be available. I'm going to keep circling back to the Atlanta Hawks' draft obligations, because you shouldn't be trading for other teams' draft picks unless they're can't miss. I understand you have to build yourself independent of, let's call it, that mistake. However, I just don't see the value in, well, let's move DeAndre Hunter for a Memphis Grizzlies first-round pick, let's say, and salary.
Yeah. I mean, he could be, well, how old is he? He's 27. So, I mean, he could definitely, he's in the middle of his prime, maybe early-ish. Like, he could definitely be a piece of this core by the time like Johnson takes another step, or maybe I think you probably hold on to him, which is risky though, right? For all the reasons we mentioned, we might look back at this and think, remember when we were discussing Atlanta getting a first for Hunter or something, he's missed time again or whatever, I could definitely see the downside of holding on to him.
This next player surprises me. You want to take us to him?
This is Nic Claxton. Just kind of like the forgotten guy when we're discussing all the players the Nets could and should trade. I guess that's part of that is because he recently signed a new deal with them and is on the younger side and, has kind of been around, one of the few guys that they're thinking of trading that has been around like during the previous Nets era when they were really trying to compete and like had some moments. But like, I don't know that I view him as is he a top 15 starting? Like, he's not a core piece. So I'm just surprised that he hasn't been part of the broader trade discussion when we're throwing all these other Nets out there, DFS and Cam Johnson and Schroeder's already been traded, all those guys. Do you agree with that? Like, and if you do you have, what is it just because he's viewed as like some kind of separate class of player from these other guys we talk about?
Honestly, I would have argued the counter at the beginning of the season and said, I think he's their best trade asset if they were like more so than a Cam Johnson or Dennis Schroeder. And I think this season, and by the way, I think they should absolutely trade him or that he should be available. No one on their roster is untouchable, but I think you could, if your answer is no, they shouldn't trade him, it'd be because it feels like his value has dropped. There was the injuries that he's dealt with this season. And the other thing is, I don't think they've been creative enough with him on offense. I was expecting to see his drives per 36 minutes tick up. They really haven't. And then also because they've played Ben Simmons like almost exclusively, as a center, that's, I think, impacted his minutes because you're not going to play him and Ben Simmons in the same front court. That's just not going to fly. Yeah. And that's also then impacted his usage. He's also, this might be more about the shape and scope of their defensive personnel, but like he's contesting like a smaller share of opponent shots when he's on the court. And so there's been a statistical and functional, and you can see it a little bit when you watch them, but I really do feel like, I don't know how much injuries impacted this. I just feel like the scope of this roster has not been built to like buoy his trade value this season. And when you combine that with, okay, he's no longer as cheap as he was last year. He's on this new deal where he's making, 20 plus million per year, that maybe that's just kind of put cold water on his value. But like, even when he signed that contract, I think you and I probably said like, oh, that just looks like a deal that's built to be traded at this point.
Right. Anything in the 20s, it feels like and in this modern cap environment is like, yeah, you could definitely, that's fine. Any, even like the Alex Caruso extension might go a little long into his decline phase, but it's like, yeah, it's in the 20s. That's movable. That's not, it's funny. It's like, that's the new cutoff. Yeah. I think it's a combination of things. Like you mentioned, he just hasn't been, I don't know. I feel like offensively, he's so limited and like still can't make a free throw that it's like good teams are going to think really hard about, we're going to spend this much to get a guy that probably can't be on the floor at the end of close games, or just has that complication thrown in there, has not developed any kind of shot, is a top 10 DPOY guy just a couple of years ago. So there's real utility with him.
The switchability is certainly still there for sure.
I think there's definitely there are use cases for him. I think it really though is the combo of the contract, and he's just not in a spot where it's easy to see him being his best self because of what's going on around him in Brooklyn.
And you wouldn't move him as part of I guess there are still teams that would prefer his contract to what they're sending out, but because he signed for 3 more years, it's not like, oh, we're giving you this short-term deal and taking back you're not taking back a longer contract in a Nicholas Claxton trade. So it's not going to be a selling point there. And if you're the Nets, okay, you should be able to get a first-round pick for him, I would think. But that might be it. It's a first-round pick and then expiring salary, whatever. Mm-hmm. Is it worth moving him at that point? I still think he should be more involved in there. I do wonder, though, how much the Pelicans' trajectory also impacted his trade value, where it was, we kind of knew that Jarrett Allen would be off limits at some point because I think we all thought the Cavs were going to be better than a lot of people. Not this good, but better than most expected. And you kind of circled the Nic Claxton as, if like New Orleans is going to go and like actually try and make a trade for a 5, and now they have no business doing that.
Yeah, right. And that's, I'm trying to think where else really needed a center. New Orleans was obviously the main.
It'd still be really interesting in Charlotte, but again, like that's not a team that's going to give you one of their first for Nic Claxton.
Right. They're too similar. They're not in Brooklyn's boat necessarily, but for a couple, like they have a cornerstone-ish player that we'll probably talk about, and they're not as pick poor. But yeah, like that doesn't, like, why are you taking on, like, I think if you're a team like Charlotte, you want a player that's fairly close to Claxton that's making like $7 million a year. You can't be paying into the high 20s as that deal goes on if you're in Charlotte's position.
Julius Randle for Nic Claxton. What is Minnesota attach a second there and get it done? No, maybe
I would do that.
That's just one expiring money.
If I'm Minnesota, I'm jumping at that. Get Randle.
So now they'll just have 3 centers again with Claxton, Reed, and Gobert.
You know it works.
Next up, we have LaMelo Ball, more of a spicier name. I would say we're both LaMelo Ball fans. Maybe I'm higher on him than you are. Do you find it interesting that he's not even like kind of sorta in the rumor mill, given that Charlotte is once again just kind of in the sub middle?
Yeah, I think, and he's one of those names that I think will. So if he doesn't really become more common in the rumor mill, it'll be because Charlotte has to come out and say we're not interested in trading them. Like we're going to get one of those things, maybe both. Just start to hear whispers, and or Charlotte will say, will leak, they're not trading him, because I think his name should be out there. So I think if you had him on the market, his market value, like the expected return, would just be higher than you could attach to any of the other names that have been like commonly discussed, because he's younger, he's under contract that's a big contract. But if you believe that he can be the best offensive player, the driver of an offense on like a good team, which there's quite a bit of evidence to suggest that's possible, then that's where you could talk about multiple young assets, matching salary, 3 firsts, like, 2 or 3, like good ones at least.
Probably. I don't think you're getting. I'm the wrong person. I would absolutely give up the equivalent of 3 first-round picks for LaMelo Ball.
I think for the right team that like his upside as a guy that could do the hardest thing there is to do, which is drive really good offense by himself, like that's valuable. And from Charlotte's perspective, I think you might just think about like, are we sure we want to build around this guy? I guess the argument you'd make for putting him on the market is that as the singular cornerstone of a young team, I don't know that you love it, but if you insert him onto a slightly more established team, we'll just say it like an Orlando, where his skills fit and there's a preset culture already that he's not setting, then I think like that's everybody wins there. I think so. That to me is the main reason why I think he should be out there.
I would agree. I think he should be. I actually wonder if, not that they missed their window, but if De'Aaron Fox is really available, like, because I feel like they could have maybe defined the trade window more if he was available, because of the names we mentioned, or most commonly mentioned, Zion, Ingram, Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine, I think LaMelo would pretty clearly get the biggest offer of those, right?
I think so. Yeah.
But now you throw De'Aaron Fox into the equation. I know that his contract is shorter, but I do think as of right now, it's pretty clear that De'Aaron Fox is the more valuable player. Like, does that, well, it's okay. Well, if we're going to give up this much for LaMelo, would it make more sense to give up a little bit more, just as much for De'Aaron Fox? And the other thing too, is he's not hurting their, like, there's as we record this, they're like 18 or 16 games under 500. So they can be bad with him. He's missed some time, of course. And that's the other thing that factors into his trade value. I do think you're approaching an interesting stage as Charlotte, where it's okay. It might be cool to now say we have Brandon Miller and LaMelo, and we're going to get another really good draft pick here. But I think this is the last season that you could say that, because then we're getting into, all right, he's entering the second year of his max deal. Like, you need to start acting like a franchise that either wants to accelerate your position. And by the way, like, we don't know long-term what Tijan Salon is going to turn into, but like, he hasn't jumped off the page this year. Like, of anything I've seen from him.
With him, it's so far down the road. Like, you might not have an idea of what that's going to look like until LaMelo's in like the last year of his current rookie max. Like, it's going to take forever.
And then Mark Williams will look good, but we're waiting for the other shoe to drop with him. I'm just like, well, when's he going to be injured again? Yeah. So I would make him available. I'm not saying they have to move him, but he's absolutely, I think, a name as Charlotte that, all right, I'm shopping. It's not that I don't think he fits with Brandon Miller. I'm just starting to wonder, like, what is the end game here in Charlotte?
Yeah, it's a little bit like some of my logic for when I would talk about the Hawks trading Trae Young would apply, minus the, like, he's taking them to an asterisk conference finals. But like, it's a little bit of like, what are we really doing with this guy as the centerpiece? And we're not there yet with LaMelo, to be clear. I don't think you're saying that either, but it's like, it's not that far off actually, where you just have to start asking that question.
And he also feels like the widest scope of potential destinations, because there might be teams that are okay, they're not ready to contend, but they still want, like, he's young, he's under contract. Like, we could rattle off like a bunch of teams that I would say should be Golden State, Houston should absolutely be in on him. Orlando, you already mentioned one of them. Like, the list would just go on. And so, do you think we'll hear his name mentioned in credible rumors by the deadline?
No, I think I'm going to couch it and say, like I said, I think it's possible we'll hear it whispered, and then Charlotte will get out there that, like, we're not looking to trade him after probably listening to offers.
Who we got next, Mr. Hughes?
This is Coby White. He does not fall into the must trade category for the Bulls, which is populated by Zach LaVine and Nick Vucevic. I guess that's probably it. They've got all types of, they have every flavor of this guy should be traded players. Coby White is he's a good offensive player. I think he's probably not your lead ball handler on as a starter for like a really good high end team, but he might be close to that. And if surrounded by better players, maybe he does get there. Really good contract. The concerns, as we've mentioned for Chicago many times, are you probably can't extend him off of this number. So he's going to hit free agency. And if you want to mitigate some of that risk, you should be thinking about moving him. And then just as a broader, like, we're tearing this thing down to the studs kind of thing.
I think he should absolutely be available, because his trade value might have peaked over the summer. It's certainly going to peak by the you're never going to get more for Coby White than you are right now. And I think you could say that every day at this point.
Every day it gets less, basically, right?
And the problem is, for the Bulls specifically, is that he's not extending off this. Like, if he signs an extension off this contract, it's about an $18-19 million salary. Like, he's not signing for that. He's too good for that. Now, you could still pay him, but you're not going to be good enough by the time he enters free agency to feel comfortable. Or maybe they view this as they are right now as good enough, contending for a play-in spot in the East. That then is a whole separate problem we need to discuss. He should be moved. Like, it just doesn't make any, because he can't be, and that's not an insult, but because he's not going to be your directional force. Like, what are you doing here? And as of right now, they get more than the equivalent of 2 first-round picks for him, right?
Oh, man. Well,
I'm not saying like a third first, but it's you get two firsts, and it's not like, oh, you have to take back this shitty ass deal.
Right. I think the thing is, he comes with the same, like, the concerns follow him, where it's like, he's probably going to go to free agency with us if we acquire him, because with the same extension arguments apply. I think you could probably get a first. I don't know if I'm giving up 2 for him, because you're right that the contract is so, like, it's just it's such a bargain for how good of a player he is. But are you giving up multiple first round assets if in the summer of 26 he just is bound to hit unrestricted free agency? Because, you know what I mean? Like, that concerns me. I
would say, yeah. Like, so if you want to say, now, I think the third first or the additional sweetener would be worth discussion. I'm giving up 2 firsts for Coby White, especially based off, one, you probably have an idea of how much he will cost you, or whether he wants to be there, for one. Like, you're not trading for him without having that knowledge. And then 2, what about the way free agency has unfolded the past 2 or 3 years makes you think that any player a team actively wants is a flight risk that you already have? So yeah, there might be more of a market because he's younger, but the days of kind of like these teams carving out max money, there might always be one threat. But look at what the Sixers did this past year. Like, it was a no-brainer max guy. And maybe some people didn't consider him a no-brainer, but it was, you knew Paul George was basically going to get the max. Coby White's not that player.
No, that's true. That's true. I don't know. I don't feel like I know it used to be so simple. What the cost of what it took to get a first back. It used to be fairly clear. Like, if they're a 6-man or better, or rotation or better, you can get a first, like the Bojan Bogdanovic rule a few years ago. But now I don't know.
I also think there's just enough team. Like, if San Antonio or Houston wanted him, like, you could include 2 firsts without really breaking any draft pick bank.
That's true. And I think too, like, kind of ironically, if you're a team that feels like you need a Zach LaVine type, but the price is putting you off, like, there's Coby White right there. He's going to give you a lot of similar stuff, like more on ball stuff probably, but can shoot it. Is just an offensive upgrade that isn't going to cost you $40+ million. You know, that feels like he's just such a good alternative to those higher priced guys.
Do you know what also makes it tough? Because I think there are teams that, so let's use the Clippers as an example. If they offered, let's just say PJ Tucker or Terrence Mann and their 2030 first round pick, that 2030 first round pick, it's only one first round pick.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, look at how the Clippers are built.
Yeah.
Now that in a vacuum, that's super valuable. But now if you're AK in Chicago, you're not going to be the person making that pick. And it also doesn't convey for so long that even if you are short, like even if this was Oklahoma City and Sam Presti has the utmost job security, you're not getting anything, especially if it's Tucker. If it's Mann, you could say, well, like he could play some defense and sometimes he's good on offense. But that's what also complicates, I think, trade discussions, that there might be some teams that are willing to give what should be these blue chip future first rounders, but they're so far into the future. How does the team that's acquiring them actively view them?
Yeah, that's always a hang up, right? Just right down to like the first thing you mentioned of the executive. What do I care? Like this is how does having a 7 years down the road first rounder improve my job security? Like
it's like you very rarely see what the Spurs did with Rob Dillingham, where it was that the only thing they got back was control over Minnesota's draft picks 6 years into the future, basically. And that was a good trade for them. Yeah. But it takes a level of foresight that certainly not the Bulls are going to be committed to.
Well, and that one, if talking about Tim Connolly, that was made by a guy that's basically got the clout to be on like a 1+1 in perpetuity with the organization. He's got so much leverage.
We're sticking with you for this next player, Grant.
Oh man. Okay. This is Josh Giddey. Good luck pegging this value, because I don't have any idea. Like he's worth Alex Caruso, apparently, who got a 4 for $81 extension. But like, you've got restricted free agency, which I guess if you're the Bulls, you can just, play that game of chicken, and decide what he's worth to you after the market tells you. I just like, why aren't you looking at what you could get for him and just avoid having, I think it's just the optics, right? That's gotta be the main reason. It's just like you blew it by taking him back in the Caruso deal. And now trading him right away is just like a second failure, in close proximity to the first.
Because there's no team that's giving you a first round pick for Josh Giddey, right? And so at that point, then I know we've had a lot of people on Twitter and YouTube saying just like, no, the Josh Giddey trade was fine. Like you weren't going to get first for Alex Caruso. We know for a fact, like you want to debate whether there was ever 2 first round picks available. I'll tell you for a fact, there was a first round pick at the time. And even beforehand, we knew there was more. And it's just, even with Caruso's age and you worry about his injuries and his minutes cap, do you feel more comfortable? Let's say they get the same deal. Who do you want for the next 4 years? Even looking at Josh Giddey, like who do you feel comfortable paying over that period of time, the same amount of money? And that's assuming he takes 4 for 80 or whatever it ends up being.
Well, like, I think we didn't like the return for Caruso. I do think at the time there was a case to be made that like Giddey's really young, like he might improve. So it's like, this is better than, like, this guy was, what was he, the 6th pick in his draft class? And he was young for the class. So it's like, we're just banking on the upside. That was fine to say then, based on how he's played this season. And this is like sneakily, this is his 4th year. Like that didn't pan out. We're not seeing signs that he's going to be someone that's going to be good enough off the ball and that can defend. And just like the counting stats are cool if you're in a roto league, I guess. And that's kind of like, I think honestly, I think that a lot, like way too often skews our evaluations of players is just like the fantasy stuff. There's a whole class of fans that are like, Josh Giddey's actually good because he's like 11, 6 and 6. That's hard to find. I think if you can get anything for him, I think you do it. As long as you're not taking, I don't think there's a future for him on the Bulls, but then what team is going to, maybe it just takes another team just zooming out and saying, this is his age 22 season. He was picked high for a reason. We've seen him be productive. Like maybe he's a 3rd draft guy and not a 2nd draft guy. We'll give you something for him. You should at least be looking if you're the Bulls.
You should be looking. Him being injured right now certainly doesn't help things, but we know they're not going to look just because you said at the top, it's the optics, I think, for this. Our next name on the board is, 2 names. Why aren't Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren more involved in trade rumors? I'm probably more curious I know that Pistons fans seem split on Jalen Duren a lot, and their defense has been a lot better without him on the court this year. But I'm more like interested in the Ivey of it all, to where even when he's been, and since he's come back from injury, he's been okay. It just feels like the offense is better when he's not. Like him playing next to Cade, okay, is fine, but he's not going to be the guy that then is able to lead the minutes independent of Cade. And so I'm wondering, I think you could make a case both ways where it's, do franchises hold on to players for too long? Like we should advocate for them trading like guys when they're in year 2 rather than waiting until year 3 or 4 or after that. And just, if you don't think he's it, but then you mentioned the word before, optics of what if Jaden Ivey is traded and he just pops. I had pushback from Pistons fans. I proposed it was THJ. I don't know what the other, a small contract, and Jaden Ivey for Zach LaVine. I would absolutely do that trade. And I know that for a fact that there's just a ton of Pistons fans that won't. And so just these two names specifically, but even the Jaden Ivey of it all, where do you sort of land?
Yeah, so we tabbed him. I think probably I led this charge more so than you did, about as one of the more improved players this year. The shooting's been shooting has been good enough. And if you came into the season with, I mean, the biggest question is like, what's the fit with Cade? And but like tied strongly with that was, can he make enough threes to be off the ball? Because you'd rather have Cade be on it. Now, in a perfect world, what he would develop into is an ace on ball, like pick and roll ball handler, driver of offense. Because I do think Cade is overtasked as like a absolute 1A guy. But I think if you're the Pistons, the reason he's not out there are the optics. And it's also just like, it's so scary to give up this early. And it's not giving up, but it's like you are put to a decision on a guy that is, he's going to be extension eligible. This is his age 22 season. He's going to get a lot better over the next 3 to 5 years. Like by the time Jaden Ivey's 28, who knows what he's going to be. And I think the fear, same with Duren, the fear is just like, if we do this now, we're not going to get the guy's best years. And what was the point of drafting him if we don't keep him around to get the best version of him? So I think it's just that. It's like a simple thing that affects every team that has a young player they drafted high. It's just like you're always going to overrate those guys. You're always going to assume improvements there. Sometimes you're right, and you just want to be the team to like reap the benefit. I think, I don't know. It's just that's most of it with guys in this boat where it's recent lottery picks, have shown some talent, just aren't helpful on a winning team yet, but like could get there. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you don't want to cut bait before you have to. That, I'm not saying they shouldn't trade him. I'm just saying like that to me is the logic for why he's not out there.
I don't know. I thought maybe that wouldn't be in play as much because this front office didn't draft him or Duren. I thought that could become a factor. And look, they're in the 63rd percentile of offense when he plays with Cade. They're in the 28th percentile without Cade, and he plays. I'm not saying the Pistons have surrounded them with the best roster just yet, but like Jaden Ivey is very rarely playing with fewer than 3 shooters on the court. I just don't think it's going to happen for him there. And I would argue, as Detroit, his value right now is higher than it was this time last season, is it not?
Yes. And I think that's a great point, because if you're the Pistons and you are sold now that like we're never going to be trusting him to run the offense like with or without Cade, and another team isn't sold yet because they haven't, been there with him every day for 3+ years, like that's why you'd move him. And that's why you're right that his value is probably higher, is because maybe the entire league is not convinced yet that he's got that limitation, but the Pistons probably have enough information to know like what player type he's going to be. And I think maybe another team might believe they can make him into something else, if that makes sense.
I would move him.
Yeah.
Where do you land on Duren?
So Duren, I actually would be more inclined to trade, because I think he's even, to me, this is always dumb with guys this young, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea of his limitations, which is to say, I don't think he's ever going to space. I don't think he's ever going to be a consistently like high level defensive anchor at center. And I think like the athleticism and like the guy looks like a player, like the frame, he's so jacked, like he moves so well.
At the picture of him right now, dude, just enormous.
Yeah, he's huge, and he's like, yeah, he's gonna be, really physically overwhelming if he wants to be. I don't know that he's someone, if you're the Pistons, you're gonna want to pay that next contract, because I do think he's gonna be pretty limited and might not be like a starting caliber center on a good team. It's just like, we haven't seen anything that says that that's like a definite thing.
I guess my whole thing would be, I think you could get a better return for Jaden Ivey, which is why you move him. What are you getting for Jalen Duren. I guess if there's a team that, like, if Minnesota was worried about Naz Reid leaving and you're upgrading his spot, but it's not like the Pistons have a ton of these 5 options outside of Isaiah Stewart. And so if the alternative, like if you're just moving him for, I don't think you're getting a first round pick in standalone value for Jalen Duren. Would you agree? I mean, like, we're talking about someone who's going to be extension eligible after this year too.
I do agree with that. And he maybe is the opposite of Ivey, where his value was probably higher this time last year or the end of the season, end of last season. Like what, I don't know. If Charlotte, it would be a second draft team for sure. Like Charlotte is like, we think he's going to just be perfect as a limited lob catcher, interior finisher, rebounder. Like we're good with that. We're good with like basically Mark Williams minus the elite shot blocking, but he stays on the floor. Like that might be it'd have to be a young team that was willing to like, let's check him out for a year and then see what restricted free agency does.
I would absolutely be open to moving him as part of, I guess, like a larger package if you're looking to get player. Like if it's Zach LaVine, and let's say you're not giving him Jaden Ivey, and it's, well, Jaren Duren's part of this package, and maybe Jalen Smith is coming back or something to make the big man math work. I guess I just look at his market and then also the personnel they have available. And I'm just like, I'd probably rather keep him, and you can make that decision over the summer.
Yeah.
But he's been the player that I want to be the highest on over the past few years, or one of them. And I just can't get them because we have this like consistent amount of, watching games. I mean, I don't watch them, but like anything you theoretically see from Jalen Duren, and then you look at the numbers, it's like, I'm trying really hard to like want to be in love with this guy. And an extended period of time, I just can't be.
He's like, we need to come up with a label for it, but he's like if you catch him in the right quarter, if you happen to see the right quarter, you will leave convinced like, well, they got to hang on to that guy. Like he really can have it in flashes, but you're right. The numbers are what they are. And overall, if you watch the next quarter, he might just look like he looks lost and overwhelmed and just isn't helpful.
This one's yours, Grant.
Why is he not? Was this one of the bombs you were referring to?
I said there was a grenade or two. The Trae Young one we started off with a grenade. He wasn't on the list that we compiled together, but I knew that you had talked about trading him in the past so that you wouldn't care. This one's just, it's because this is yours, but I want to know, is it like, is it just Steph Curry needs to ask for a trade? Because if the Warriors aren't, I argued that them acting early on Dennis Schroeder was smart, but he's come in and like it's been the same thing of, well, he doesn't fit because like they don't run the offense that would maximize Dennis Schroeder. And so now I'm almost interpreting as it's not so much that they acted early, but they just reiterated that, no, we're not going to do anything that's like really meaningful on the trade market.
I mean, we're having a different conversation if he's not shooting so poorly from 3, I think. I don't know if that would be the right conversation, but like if he just had some decent shooting, it would feel different. Like, I think if anything, what Schroeder's addition and like lack of impact has illustrated is just what we sort of knew, which is the only thing that's really going to meaningfully change Golden State's ceiling is the addition of a player who's like maybe not as good as Steph, but like on some nights can be, like that's the level of acquisition they would need to make a difference. And then even then you're not like filling all the holes. So why isn't Steph Curry on the market or discussed? It's because you started out correctly. It's just, it will take him saying specifically, you need to trade me for them to trade him. Like, I just think it's a Dirk, Tim Duncan situation where the franchise will just like go down in flames with Steph if that unless he says, I want to leave. Like, there's just no scenario where the front office decides this is the thing to do proactively. I just can't imagine that scenario. Can you imagine that? Like, I just don't think that's possible.
No, it's not possible. But if you're not committed to maximizing the Steph window and you're worried about giving up future picks and not being able and like giving up on a Pods or a Kuminga before they pop, wouldn't the callous or rational decision to people, then we should look at moving Steph because we're not trying to win, but basketball is a business. And there's the emotional component. And if Steph doesn't want to leave, I don't know how you trade him. And he's won 4 titles, but it's just, I don't know. I still think the Warriors have more optionality than I thought they would at the start of the season, even though we've kind of seen them, slow down is probably the charitable way of putting it.
Collapse.
It bugs me. And it's the same thing with LeBron and the Lakers. And we might get to them. It's just, well, if you're not doing this, like if you're not going for it, then why are they here?
Right. Well, I think with LeBron, it's way easier to justify trading him because he's not like he's changed teams 3 times. Like he's not like a lifetime Laker. It's he came, he got
the season. Is this the most years now that he's spent like consecutively with the same team, or was his first stint in Cleveland longer?
It's got to be the first stint in Cleveland was longer, I would think.
This is his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 season in LA, and he was in Cleveland for 7. So it's tied.
That is insane. I cannot believe. Well, I mean, I get it. Like, it just, you know what the problem is? The last 7 years have gone a lot faster than any previous set of years in my life. That's wild. But like, come on, it's not the same thing as but that is wild. He'll probably be with the Lakers for longer than, well, what's the total years in Cleveland? Because he had what, 4 more?
11 in Cleveland total. He's not going to be, if he's with 11 with the Lakers, I'll actually be excited he played that long.
Wouldn't that be incredible? I mean, probably not going to happen. But
if he's there next season, though, he will have been with the Lakers consecutively more than any other team. That's wild.
That feels wrong. With Steph and the Warriors, do you think? I think it was fair to say that, like, over the summer. Maybe it was fair to say, depending on how legit any of the marketing and stuff was, that they like weren't willing to mortgage the future entirely, right? Because they probably could have done something if they'd wanted to, and they opted for like the middle path, depth, and whatever, good contracts, all that stuff. I'm inclined to believe that right now they are more willing, partly because like the young guys that they wouldn't trade away have just been bad. But I think it's like a scarcity issue. It's like we'll trade whatever to maximize the win now window. But like Jimmy Butler, is like Zach LaVine, like I don't think that the guys are out there. Like if Giannis were available, I think they put everything on the table. Or if like,
here's the problem is that the guys that they want, then they're never gonna have the package to get. There's no scenario in which they have the best offer for Giannis.
Right. But I think they've determined that the guys that they could get right now, that they could have the best offer for, like, don't get them where they need to be. And so like, they're not happy with this. Like, let's keep the assets, keep the powder dry. But it's like, we can't spend it all on someone that then where does that leave us? Like, we're not going to get where we want to. And then we're screwed for the next 5 years.
I guess I just don't have any empathy for that stance because it does feel like it feels like wouldn't the middle ground be, okay, we can get Zach LaVine then without giving up a pick or something, and then just do that.
Yeah.
And at least because maybe because you mentioned it seemed like over the offseason, even though they were linked to these guys, we don't know how serious the market and stuff was a joke based off what they were offering. And so I guess you could argue then that Steph signed his extension, and yes, he still is eligible to be traded. I wasn't talking to you with that, just I know you know. Like, you could argue Steph has done this eyes wide open, because I would just wonder, like, well, why? I'm not faulting Steph for this. It's not a player. Like, put more pressure on the front office, damn it. Yeah. Like, make them do something more than bring in Dennis Schroeder.
I think they're lucky they have him for a number of reasons, but I think almost anyone else in his position over the last few years, especially having won a championship like 2 years ago, would be like, what are we doing? Like, relying
why
on
Jokic doing that in Denver? He's not on this list. Clearly, we skipped.
Yeah, right. But like a lot, you know what I mean? Like he could have exerted a lot of like very uncomfortable pressure. And it seems to me like what happens is they go to him and they say, "Here's our plan. Are you okay with this?" And he'll say like, "I want to win, but yeah, like let's go with that." And they're probably telling him like I'm sure they've asked him, "What do you think about LaVine for this? What do you think about Butler for this?" And I would imagine that he hasn't said like, "Do it, full stop." Because if he had, like, I feel like now at this point, they probably would have done it. But like, you can't, what's happened over the last 2-3 weeks with how the team has played and how ineffective the pieces they've held on to, the young pieces have been. It's like, okay, well, this second timeline ain't working. Like, it's time. Now is the time. Although I think you were probably right to argue that time was quite a while ago, that they should have just gone for it.
This is still you. And it's a more realistic question, I think, in my opinion, this next player.
Yeah.
If the Warriors, I'm going to hijack it because it's the Warriors and I want your opinion more than I want to hear from me. Like, if you're actively looking at, I guess, buying or something, and also what happened to him defensively? I had him third in defensive player of the year voting a few weeks ago, and He's definitely not cracking my top 5 at the moment. But is that something that's not realistically on the table because you risk, like, how would Steph feel if you're giving up Draymond Green to get, I don't even know what like, if you're getting De'Aaron Fox or, but like, shouldn't Draymond Green be on the tape, like realistically on the table in some capacity, whether it's as part of a larger package to buy or, hey, can we get any positive value for him now?
Yeah, I think he should be in a vacuum, but I think that's right that it's not something they're looking at through a totally rational lens. Like sentiment is involved, like Curry's opinion obviously is involved. I think, and then the other part of it is like, where are you sending him for value at this point? Like at what kind? I think it's got to be a team that's trying to win right now. But man, is he like? Has there ever been a more specific fit that we have less information on how he would do? This is an old argument with him. Like,
Right.
If you're trading for him, the breadth of teams that would go for it and have confidence that he could fit is like so narrow, right? Because you just have no idea how he's going to fit anywhere. Because he's never been anywhere else. He's never been with any other star player. So like, that's a part of it too, as much as anything else. But you're right. I think he is someone. I independently had this thought earlier today when I was thinking of guys to throw out there. Like, why, if it were a normal situation, he would absolutely, well, they would have traded him a long time ago because of all the nonsense. But like, I think he would definitely be on the block. I don't know that he'd have this contract. First of all, if he were anyplace else, that's another factor.
Do you think that his contract is bad?
I don't think it's bad. I just think it's like, it's a number so he's making 24 this year, goes up to almost 26 next year, and has a player option for all 27-7 in 2026, 2027. So I don't know. He probably will pick that up, I would imagine. I don't know what he's going to be expecting to get when he's in his age 37 summer. I think it's not something you just take on without, like, you could take that on and the out years of that could be really awful because he has slipped. I think to your point, like he's just not, he's still a good defender.
I'm generally asking, where has he slipped? Or did you think I was and just didn't say anything in the moment that I was off my rocker by putting him third?
I think you had him too high, but I also think like that was how long enough ago. And the Warriors defense was good enough at the time. And it's still pretty good. Like he's still a good defender. I don't think he's one of the best defenders in the league. I guess you could say he's one of the best defenders in the league still, like per minute, but like he's not playing as much. He is taking quite a bit more off the table offensively. I think it does feel like the turnovers and the mistakes there's more of them, and that's just age. I think like he just doesn't move the same. And okay, like nobody does this deep into a career. So I think like if you're trading for him, you probably would need to believe that he can single-handedly just win you games defensively, like in high stakes games. And that's possible, like for a couple playoff series, maybe. But the fit is so difficult. Like you need stretch all around him. You need to learn how to play with him because he's such a unique offensive player. Like it's just, I think it's, as much as anything, the market is so weird for him that might be as big a reason as anything that he's not out there.
Would it be more appealing to you if it was going to save you? Because I do think there would be, I think he still has like first round pick value. I'm not being like, oh, I'm not giving up a first round pick for Draymond. That contract is toxic. If you had the option of whether it's part of a Jimmy Butler trade or for someone else, and you're able to give up Draymond, and then that's going to allow you to keep, whether it's a Pods or a Kuminga or some of your first round stash, are you at the point where you would view that scenario, like remove sentiment from it, even though that's tough to do?
Yeah.
Is that more appealing than let's give up Andrew Wiggins and like as our primary salary anchor?
Right. Yeah. Wiggins is a tough one. If you could do it with Pods and Kuminga, but that just, what does that even get you to? Like
they make like 12 million combined or something incredible.
Yeah. Kuminga's making 7.5, Pajemski's 3.5. Right. Yeah. So it's just like, you can't, unless you're going to make it like a 5-player trade to rope in Gary Payton and Kyle Anderson.
I've reached the point where to me, it's if you're not getting a wing back. So if it's Jimmy Butler, like, I mean, you have to get super creative to get there without Andrew Wiggins or Draymond Green in there. but like I give up Andrew Wiggins for Jimmy Butler just because you're getting a wing. But I'm now at the point where it's Kuminga's not a wing, Draymond's not a wing. So if you're not getting a wing back, you can't trade Andrew Wiggins.
Well, yeah, and I do think too, if you're guys, so if you're trading for Butler, you can't be trading Draymond, because the theory of why you're trading for Butler is like, we're just going all the way with the oldest guys we got that are still our best players.
But also, why not? What if it's like, what if that's the difference between having to give up a distant first or keeping pods type deal? Because you're still going to have TJD on this roster. You could maybe is like, or Kyle Anderson, go to more small ball 5 there. You also have Kevon Looney. Like, you have enough I'll say bigs to keep that it's all right. Like, just go out there and sign another cheapo big off the buyout market, or go trade for another backup big. It's because if you're getting Butler specifically, like, isn't there a chance that your defense is probably still just going to be good enough then anyway?
I guess so I'm going to have to like talk out of both sides of my mouth now, because I did just go through how Draymond has slipped, but I think he still is the guy that, other than Steph, has the greatest capacity to like impact meaningful games. So, and there's probably an argument to be had about Wiggins, and there's probably an argument to be had about like, how much better is Jimmy Butler going to be than Andrew Wiggins if you price in the availability stuff in the short term? Like, Butler is better, but like, I mean, Wiggins has been great. He's been really good this year, but he's not. He's a great third best player. He can't be your best guy.
And I think and I hate planning like this, especially because during the playoffs, you're not going to get a ton of non-Steph minutes, but it's who's going to be more equipped to lead you during those minutes, Andrew Wiggins or Jimmy Butler.
It's not a debate for sure.
The other thing too, do you think that there's a chance, because I wouldn't trade Draymond, like I would just go all in, and how you just phrased it, where it's just go all in around the older guys. So you're trading the others, but like Draymond's minutes are so intertwined to Steph's that I'm almost kind of like, well, what does the drop off look like? Are you saying that the Steph minutes are going to suck after you trade Draymond? Because he's played, as we record this, we're 30 games into the season. He's played under 400 possessions without Steph Curry.
Yeah.
That's not like a shit ton. And so I hate thinking like this, but I've also kind of wondered, well, yes, I want to make it clear, there would be a difference, but I'm just sort of like, well, if you're still counting on Steph to elevate you while he's on the court, if removing Draymond from those minutes, are you getting a metric ton worse if you're acquiring a Jimmy Butler or another high-ish end player? And I would just wonder if, again, sentiment's going to be part of it, but if you're looking at it through that lens, is there a possibility that this isn't as big of a deal on the court?
Yeah, it's possible. I think one of the issues that is really hurting the Warriors this year is like, Steph isn't quite good enough now to sort of render the types of defenses that he's seeing, like to just neutralize those, because he's always been doubled and held and all this other stuff. It's harder for him to get separation. He's not as quick. It's just his ball he can't blow by guys like he used to. And like, because of that, having someone like Draymond out there with him on offense that defenses still can treat like as a non-threat a lot of the time, that's become harder. Like, it's made the offense harder as a team. And the trade-off, like what you're losing there now, because Steph is a little diminished, because Draymond is someone that defenses forever have like at least kind of messed around with schematically, like, oh, we can play him a certain way. Like, what Draymond's giving you on defense isn't making up that difference. So it's kind of like a big shock. Like, the two mid-30s cornerstones on each end are like not as good, and so that's hurt the team. Like, but even the interplay between them, like one being slightly diminished, actually hurts the other because they're such a specific pairing, you know?
I'd be curious what teams would actually be in if the Warriors just send out there, it's like Draymond Green's available and there's like no specifications.
Yeah.
Maybe they would accept draft equity. I wonder what teams would come call. I think the Lakers would for sure.
Yeah. And didn't he say that like he had a bigger offer from Memphis on his last deal? Like, I think Memphis was offering 4 for $100.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Something like that. Like, I don't know how I feel about the Memphis fit now. But you could definitely get excited about him and Jaren Jackson as like a 4-5 combo. Like, Jackson is the type of big that an acquiring team would almost need to have, I think, because if you don't have a Steph-like player to do the 2-man game with Draymond, you're just going to need a spacer at the other big position.
I maintain, and their defense has played better since Andrew Nembhard came back, but I would love him on the Pacers.
Sure.
Would be a fact with Turner.
Another playmaker too. Like, yeah, and Turner, right. Exactly. The list of guys that you aren't having immediate reservations about fit-wise in the front court is pretty short. Like, okay, who else even spaces? I can't even think. Like, here's Brook Lopez.
Here's one. If you're the Knicks, so now you're talking, okay, well, Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson have to go because you need to get to Draymond's number. And maybe you could do Josh Hart. Like, Josh Hart has to go because he's just the largest number.
Yeah.
Would you consider that because of what you're trying? You wouldn't.
I don't know. I don't know why the Warriors are doing that like that, but like I don't
get your Washington Wizards first, maybe a Bacom Dadier.
Yeah, you get your fake first back. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, the Knicks. Yeah, with Cat, that's another one that makes some sense there. Although, like, just having OG at the 4 next to Cat feels totally fine to me. I think.
Well, I'm more so thinking like they need to play defense against good teams. Like, I know the Knicks defense is ticked up, but it's let's see how the Knicks defense fares against the type of offenses they're going to face in the playoffs. And even as of right now, the Knicks against top 10 offenses are dead last in defensive rating. And even if you want to be like, I'm not a big fan of doing it this way. I want to make it clear where it's, well, why don't we just like filter out that Boston game? And it's like, well, we don't filter it out because Boston's a team that they're measuring themselves against.
Yeah,
but you filter out that Boston game, and against top 10 offenses, the Knicks are 26th in points allowed per possession. So I'd just be curious. I don't think they would do it either. I would just be curious, like, would you prefer Draymond or Josh Hart on the current makeup of the Knicks for what they're trying to do?
That's interesting. I mean, if I like the idea of Draymond giving the Knicks like a small ball option if you wanted to.
He takes care of some backup 5 stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, right. He could be your backup center, which is like really, kind of his ideal role, frankly. Like if he can give you, like, do you really want to take Cat off the floor the way he's been shooting it though? Like he gives you a different option, I think, which matters if they're trying to win conference finals games.
Yeah, but it also feels like he's more like him and OG Anunoby can play the same defensive role. So I'm almost wondering if your core 5 lineup gets better, like at both ends. Like, okay, Josh Hart, he's just more dynamic offensively.
Yeah,
but defensively, Draymond is still more dynamic. And so does that make your top end lineup better going from Josh Hart to Draymond? I think there's a case to be made.
It might. And I think too, like Brunson is one of the guys that I think Draymond could really have some pretty good synergy with, that you could run a lot of fun actions with the two of them. It's, Brunson's not going to relocate and do all the off-ball sprinting quite as much, but like they're both so clever that I think like the 2-man game would be interesting as an off.
But is there really any replacing the power of friendship?
Yes. Well, friendship doesn't matter. Ask Dante DiVincenzo.
Do you want to take us through? We have back-to-back Pacers. Do you want to guide us through them?
So these guys get talked about collectively all the time. This is Jarace Walker and Bennedict Mathurin. A couple of flashes from Jarace Walker lately. I don't know if you've seen him.
He went on a Jarace Walker solo run against the Thunder the other night. That was pretty badass.
He's nearing the Duren territory for me of like, catch him on the right stretch. You can sort of get a little bit sold. But that's only true of guys that you're mostly not sold on. So I don't know what that says. So just, I don't know. Let's go through it. The idea for Indy putting these guys on the table is that it's unclear how either of them fits long-term. The Pacers are a team that has a supermax player in Tyrese Haliburton, and they just paid a boatload to Pascal Siakam. You're giving Obi Toppin $20 million a year. Like you've spent, and you're not an old team, but you're not a team that's just throwing the young guys out there to see how they do and let's develop at their own pace. Like these guys need to help. Mathurin has been productive. I think most people that watch a lot of Pacers will say he's not an additive guy. Like the fit is not great with Haliburton, certainly on defense. And his value might be pretty high. Like, I don't know what Walker's value is around the league, but I think Mathurin is someone that a team could talk itself into. Like, oh, he's a starting shooting guard and is going to be a high level scorer. Like you wouldn't be crazy to think that, especially over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's kind of if the Pacers want to sort of get this season back on track and like meet the standard they set last year, these are the guys you'd look at moving, and you need to throw salary in because they're both on rookie scale deals. But like you could do something if you're looking to make a short-term upgrade with either of these guys, right?
I think that's ultimately why they're not. And the Pacers have been playing better lately, of course. I
Yeah.
still don't. The Bennedict Mathurin one, I just don't know what to think of Jarace Walker just yet. We haven't seen enough like extended Jarace Walker.
Let me ask you, is it just as a bigger idea, is it almost better that Walker is like, I don't know, like, because a team could talk itself into, oh, look at this, they just the untapped potential versus Mathurin. I do think we know roughly like what kind of player he is.
Right. And I think mystery boxes are going to be stronger selling points through their first 2 years of the league rather than once you get to year 3, it's well, we either have you figured out, or if you're a mystery box, it's like, and you've actually been playing. Well, what are you worth? But the tricky thing with Mathurin too, he's been defending better of late, been rebounding better too. And like, those are the things you kind of look at and say like, well, that's what they would need. The offense just doesn't jibe.
Right.
Like even when he's efficient, even when he's scoring with the rest of the Pacers, and Caitlin Cooper has talked about this a bunch, there's just no catch and shoot instincts there from him really. But the reason it feels like they're not mentioned in the rumor mill, because you look at them, I'm with you. Yeah, you make these guys available, but you have to trade them in a very specific, because you're not just trading these guys for draft picks because of where you're at. And I think that's why they're not mentioned, is because the teams, like what teams would even, they're in this weird spot where it's the Pacers internally probably value them more. That always happens with your own player, but we're talking about guys who are on rookie scales. I think there's more of a discrepancy there. And then it's, okay, what team, the teams that are going to trade first round picks are traditionally the teams that wouldn't play either of these guys just for where they're at, or lean on them a ton because of their timelines. And it just puts them in a sticky spots where you're really only looking at moving one or both of them if it's part of what I think, you and I could sit this and say, I'm not going to throw a name out and offend Pacers fans, but it's, yeah, you would give him up for this player. They would probably looking at it through the prism of like, no, it needs to be, if we're giving up Bennedict Mathurin and or Jarace Walker, it needs to be like a really big trade.
So I know that we can just play this card almost all the time, but is something they could get from Brooklyn like worth it to them? Because Brooklyn is the type of team that should be interested in guys exactly like this, right? That have shown something on the team that drafted them, but just aren't positioned to be big pieces with that. Like Brooklyn can do the thing where it's like, guess what, guys? 35 minutes a night, do whatever you want for the rest of the year. Let's just see.
Walker in Brooklyn, I think, would be nasty.
Well, so right, like, and I think Brooklyn, and if he's not, oh well, Brooklyn is just trading vets that it doesn't really want, and you get back team control of guys on rookie scale deals, all those benefits. Like, is there something from Brooklyn that should entice the Pacers enough to consider moving one or both of these guys there? Because the fit from Brooklyn side is a no-brainer.
Well, let's tackle it from this way. Would you give up one of these guys for Cam Johnson? So it'd be Obi Toppin plus Mathurin or Walker, and then maybe there needs to be other salary involved there. But would you give up that package if you're Indiana for Cam Johnson?
I think I would. Wouldn't you?
Now, I don't think the Nets accept that package is the problem because of Obi Toppin's contract.
Well, you might do better. Yeah, you might be able to do better for Cam.
Now I'm asking you, would you give up both, and you're getting rid of Toppin to get Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson? There'd have to be other moving parts, but is that not, that's like one of an interesting thing where I think the Nets might be getting enough, but I'm wondering if Indiana's not. And I think if you pushed me, I'd probably say do it from the Pacers end, just because I view them getting off Obi Toppin's. Yes, I know cap space. One, they're not going to have it. Two, it doesn't matter in Indy, but that deal is always going to be part of the other side saying, we're doing this for you until it gets into the final year. It's, we're taking on the Obi Toppin contract. Like that's part of the value that we're sending out.
Yeah, I'd think really hard about that. Now, if you could work it so you have Claxton in there, because I could see Claxton making sense as a Myles Turner replacement who's going to be a free agent. Like he's just your center going forward. Different player, not going to give you the spacing, but is kind of in the right age band. Like is locked down. Like
Interesting.
I think you probably wouldn't. It would be hard to get both Cam Johnson and Claxton without giving up both of these two Toppin, and maybe you're sending picks at that point too.
No, I don't. I'm not. So I wouldn't send picks in addition to these two the Pacers. I understand why the Nets would want it. I think because you have Nesmith's money that you could get too, and they've been defending well while Nesmith has been in, well, not the entire time, but for the month of December. I still think he's important.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you would prefer, I guess Claxton and Johnson makes sense from a net value perspective. It just feels weird so we're bringing in Myles Turner's replacement. What does that mean might be a pretty good segue though, because guess who's next up on the list?
Yeah, Grant? There it is. Now you can flip him. Now you can move him somewhere else. Let somebody else re-sign him. I mean, maybe he goes to Brooklyn and Brooklyn just uses its cap space on him.
I think I prefer Turner next to Siakam more than I would a Claxton. I know Claxton's younger.
Turner's better. Turner's better and fits better. But I'm just thinking of it. By the way, we're just spitballing like from
you can also keep both. Like if Turner, like having that's a lot wrapped up, and then Siakam, and let's say Turner costs 20 a year, and then you have Claxton. That's a lot of money invested in your 4-5 rotation right there.
Yeah, but I mean,
you're getting off top.
That's too much. That's too much. It's just it's a like a risk aversion thing. Like you swap Claxton in, dust your hands off. Like we don't have to worry about losing our starting center. Whereas with Turner, there's some unknowns there. Although they probably have a pretty good idea of what it's going to take, I would assume. They've had such a long relationship. He's been there for a decade.
Oh, is it?
I mean, I don't know.
I actually don't think Turner should be, again, I'm not saying he's untouchable, but like, what are you getting from Myles Turner, or what is the player you're acquiring where you feel good? I don't think Claxton falls under that bucket, but like, if you're trading Turner, I'm assuming it's someone was either stupid and gave you way too much draft equity, or you're upgrading the spot in the front court next to Siakam. It's like, what is the player where you would feel you're not giving up Turner? Like, I'm not trading him for Cam Johnson and then running Siakam at the 5 with Cam Johnson. That's not something I'm doing.
I mean, weirdly, Claxton makes some sense, finances aside. Now I'm really talking myself into this, because if like what you lose in Turner is significant, like the spacing, the shot blocking. But like I think Claxton's just a better defender overall. And you get the switch stuff from him, which is like, if you're a Pacers team that's constantly having to hide guys like Halliburton or like make up for stuff like that, I think Claxton's ability to just blow up any screening action by just switching onto the ball handler. I know you probably would not bring him up very often, but
he's also the better rebounder too, I would say.
Right. That's another issue. Younger, gets up and down fine. Like, I think you could make the case that Claxton would, in a different way, bring at least as much value as Turner does. But it'd be a weird switch, because Turner does make sense, at least for them offensively. Like I think he probably gives you quite a bit more there.
So that feels like, because, and what's also weird is that it would have to be part of one of our mega deals, because I wouldn't give up more than Myles Turner for Nic Claxton. But if I'm the Nets, why am I taking on Myles Turner? It would have to be almost a bigger trade, or is there a third team involved? They're giving something to the Nets. Then not untouchable, but I just don't know that they're gonna do. I see where you're coming from with Claxton. I think I appreciate the concept of his stretch too much.
Yeah. And to be clear, I hadn't thought about Nic Claxton on the Pacers until we talked about it 5 minutes.
That's why these podcasts are fun. Because but here would be, so the Lakers come calling. They will give you their 2029 first round pick for Myles Turner, and you're taking salary X. I doubt it's Rui. It's probably D'Lo or Gabe Vincent and like, are you doing a deal like that?
I mean, I'm just so the Pacers right now are 8th. They still have a negative differential. They're 15 and 16. That feels like the wrong type of move for them, because of what we just said about Walker and Mathurin, of like, what do we want this pick for? Unless we know we need it to throw into a trade that is for another, you know what I mean? Like, which is, why not just try to get the guy you're going for?
I guess what we're saying is we're pretty much in agreement, despite the Pacers disappointing relative to all their expectations, is that they need to act as buyers, because there's not going to be, in the players that they would move, there doesn't seem to be a ton of incentive to, let's get this draft equity.
Yeah, I don't think draft equity, I mean, I don't think it should be their first sort of target. I think even if you're trading Turner, which is exactly the type of guy you would trade for draft picks in another, situation.
I mean, they could go on like they could get worse over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And maybe it's, he's going into free agency. Do we just get first? But then it just gets tough. You're not going to be a team that has all this money to spend. Do you think you can approximate a good center with what you're going to have at your disposal from there? That's what's also tricky.
Yeah. Right. And by the way, trading for someone like Claxton, who's been hurt all the time, like, not something a Pacers team that can't keep centers healthy should be.
Well, that's why I'm team just have Cam Johnson, Claxton, Siakam, and Turner. And so you're like weirdly big, and you're not really super strong or a great rebounding team, but do it anyway. I'm all for it. This player is mine, and he's on the Clippers. Grant, Why haven't we heard about Kawhi Leonard in the trade rumor mill? What's up with that?
I want to say, I think I probably in doing like some far-fetched or like a dream trade target thing. I had him as a Warriors target when it was amidst the Markkanen and Paul George, or probably after that.
Do you know what I proposed on my solo pod the other day? Kawhi Leonard for Jimmy Butler and Alec Burks. Because if you're the Heat, you're kind of accepting, okay, maybe this becomes a gap year, and you do take on longer money for Kawhi Leonard, but peak Kawhi Leonard, who is younger than Jimmy Butler, he's also better than Jimmy Butler. And so are you maybe saying, okay, like, and we think that we can build like around Kawhi Leonard. And then if you're the Clippers, it's okay, Kawhi Leonard is better, but Jimmy Butler is more available. Maybe they appreciate the idea of, well, he's technically an expiring contract, but only has one more year left, or maybe they view getting off Kawhi Leonard as part of it. I don't think the Clippers are giving up a 2030 pick as part of that trade. I will say that.
If that happened and you and what you know is Kawhi is going to Miami, don't you immediately have some version of like, oh shit, like they're gonna figure it out. He's gonna play 70 games and he's gonna win an MVP. like oh, they did it again. Wouldn't you feel like something? It would you know how it used to be, whoever the Spurs drafted in the second round, it would just constantly be like, oh, they did it again. Like they found this guy. You just automatically believe it. It's probably not totally up to date to believe that about Miami anymore. But I would have that thought of like, okay, we're going to get 2 more amazing Kawhi years that we weren't getting otherwise. I would assume that.
Who do you think that deal is tougher for Miami to make, right? Or is it actually tougher for LA to make?
I think oh man, that's a great question. My first reaction was it's tougher for LA to make because Kawhi is better and Butler's maybe going to hit free agency. And so you could just be wiping off a $50 million salary slot from the books and getting really nothing for it. So I think I view the Clippers side as a little scarier.
Interesting.
You think just from Miami's side, trading for Kawhi and assuming you're getting anything consistent is just
that's
too
your
big
Jimmy
of a
Butler return. Like as the Clippers, like let's say Jimmy Butler's not, if you let Jimmy Butler leave, it's because you wanted to let Jimmy Butler leave. It's kind of the Paul George situation again. And so I would then think, well, they wanted the expiring contract. But if you keep him even, it's going to be on a 2-year deal. So you've even kind of shaved off because Kawhi's under contract for 3 more years after this one, right? So now you've kind of shortened that. And with the uncertainty surrounding James Harden, I think it's easier for them to make, but maybe I'm not approaching it from the right, because then it's Miami. If Kawhi Leonard doesn't pan out, then you did lose Jimmy Butler for not just nothing, but then a bad contract, right?
Right. That is the risk. I mean, it's a massive risk. I think like so over the life of, let's say Butler signs a 2-year extension. And by the way, we never see trades like this where like two basically all NBA guys. It's like a 1-for-1. It's like a challenge trade. But so you say Butler signs for 2 more. So basically their contracts, let's just forget the contract.
By the way, I have to interrupt because I was wrong. Kawhi actually only has 2 more years left on his deal.
Okay, after this. Perfect. So if Butler opts out and he signs the 2 for 120, their deals are exactly 2 more years after this one. Who would you feel is the best bet to I was going to say like play the most games, but I feel like that's probably just Butler, although it's not a throwaway.
Well, like who see more value?
Who do you like as your best player for the next 2 years?
I don't know. I
don't either.
I honestly don't know. It's the availability thing with Kawhi, but do you feel better, or maybe not better, but is it more of a worthwhile risk because Miami plays in the East and it's sort of, well, we just need to figure out a way to get him to April.
Right.
And then so if you did that, I mean, the Clippers are kind of doing that right now, so maybe I shouldn't say that, but normally you wouldn't, we didn't expect the Clippers to be afloat without Kawhi at all this year. If you're in the East, it's kind of like, if Kawhi can play in like 30 games and we get him to April, because feel better if they're both healthy. You feel better about Kawhi being your best player in a postseason series, right?
Which is insane because that's Jimmy Butler's whole identity, right? It's like, well, we just get into a playoff series and Jimmy will be the best player on the floor. Like that has happened. But I also feel like I'd rather just have Kawhi. I just think it's like when Kawhi is the best player on the floor in a playoff series after whatever's happened during the regular season, it's kind of like, well, yeah, like that's that's who that is. But when Butler does it, where we have the like, we're like amazed, it seems like more surprising. So I guess that's an argument for Kawhi, because we all collectively agree that if he's on the floor and healthy, he's just a top 5, top 10 guy. That's probably stupid to keep thinking that. But with Butler, it's more of like, look at this ascent that he's made, like I don't know how to view that. I think I would rather have Kawhi, but like both of these guys will probably average 45 games a year.
I just want to make it clear, I did not for us to spend that much time on this. I included this as more of a blow by. No, well, that was one of the grenades, but I'm glad we talked ourselves into a pretzel. Grant, who's next?
This is Anthony Davis. This is someone who, again, so this is a little bit like the Steph thing you were saying of like, if you're being coldly logical, what are you doing if you're not winning at the highest level with this guy who's still really great? And for the Lakers, it's like, I don't know, maybe, what are they right now? They're in the giant, morass that is the middle of the West. They're 6th. The difference between 6th and 3rd is like 3 games. And that's the same difference between 6th and 12th. So whatever, who knows where they actually are, but they don't feel like a contender. You have a player that is,
because they're not. That's why they don't feel like a contender.
but Anthony Davis is the best other than Steph, and maybe it might be a better player than Steph right now today. I don't know. If you're not going anywhere and you're not going to make the 3 firsts for what, in salary for another star to try to win now, like, do you think about it? I don't know. I think you probably have to.
I would say, isn't the only reason for him not to be available? Well, you said it. If you're going to go all in, then we're going to keep him. But if they're not going to go all in, you're just saying, well, we don't control our first round pick in 25 or 27. So that's why we're not going to trade Anthony Davis. So you're not going to go all in, and then you're not going to trade Anthony Davis, because as of right now, they should trade Anthony Davis. I have seen no convincing argument other than they don't control their first round pick in 2025 or 2027. And maybe that's convincing enough, but I'm almost sort of like, well, this season, you already know you're not going to give away a top 5 pick, or most likely, or something wild. And then it's just bank on maybe trying to figure it out. Like so the trade I proposed, I should be looking at the exact framework because it got a lot of traction on like what the YouTube reaction stuff. I know Kenny For Real looked at it. There were a couple others that people messaged me about, like the Warriors. We're talking about the Warriors going all in. If you got 3 first round picks and 2 swaps and Kuminga and Wiggins from the Warriors, like, isn't that a trade that you should just do? So you're getting Golden State's first rounder in 25, 27, and then 2030, and you only get it if it's between 1 and 20. And then you get swaps in 2026 and 2028, Kuminga, Wiggins, and then you could throw in GP2, Kevon Looney, whoever you want to make the money work. Shouldn't you just pounce? If I'm the Warriors, by the way, I'm making that trade too. But like, if you're the Lakers, isn't that enough to say yes, independent of owning your own picks, or no?
No, I think that's exactly the logic that should be in play here. And also, like, shorting the Warriors latter half of this decade is not a bad bet. Like, just based on where they are, maybe they're going to be an attractive free agency destination. Maybe free agency doesn't matter anymore. Like maybe that doesn't mean as much as it used to. So yeah, I think that's right. It would be so bizarre to see Davis be the one when everybody is like, fancifully thinking about is LeBron being the one to go to the Warriors as like the big veteran star addition. But like Davis would just, I mean, either one of those guys.
Which, by the way, doesn't that seem old and young at the same time, right? Because it feels like he's been around for forever. So age 31 is fine. But then you're just thinking, oh, he's over 30 and Anthony Davis is injured every 5 seconds.
Right. No, I think, so what has he got? He just extended, right? So he can be traded, even though he did sign in the extension.
Yeah, he'll be trade eligible, and he has, what does he have? 4 years left after this?
He's got 3 after this one. So yeah, he's gonna, and that extension pays him 54 next year, 58, and 63 in 27, 28.
Which look, so you're getting him through what, age 34, age 35? That's about like the cutoff of, okay, like if you're going into 36 and 37, that's when you start to get worried. But that feels the next 3 years of Anthony Davis when he's healthy will be probably close to peak Anthony Davis.
Yeah, like he'll be an all NBA level guy. Certainly, the first couple, maybe not by 27, 28, but like the injury thing is probably the bigger risk, or like just how much actual court time are you going to get from him for that? That's maybe the bigger concern. I don't think he's going to like not be an all-star level player by the end
Mm.
of it. I'd be surprised by that.
Do you think it's complicated though so when you look at the teams that maybe have the most picks to trade and also buy, Houston or OKC probably shouldn't be in on Anthony Davis, just looking at the makeup of their teams. OKC for sure, right? You have Holmgren, Hartenstein, you're done.
Yeah.
I guess you could make a case. Would you prefer Anthony Davis and Şengün to, Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. / like having kind of the smaller fours?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about him. Yeah, OKC, I think I'd rule out, but Houston is kind of, one of the things Houston doesn't really have is someone that's just going to score, for them at the end of close games. And like, weirdly, that is kind of something Davis might be able to do. I don't think that's the number one thing you want him for, but the Lakers designed their offense to feature him this year. And at least early on, he looked great offensively in a more featured role. Like, I think he would give the Rockets a pretty interesting dimension, because Şengün is kind of a hub-like player, but he's not like Davis is going to get you more shots, I think. I don't know. Yeah. Of the two, Houston I like better, but he is like a weirdly tricky player to trade just because
after Golden State, I was trying to think of teams. Indiana should, just because he's under contract, he shouldn't care necessarily what he thinks. That would be okay, go swing for this. That'd be interesting.
Trying to think what else. Like, yeah.
Would you like him in Memphis? Like, I know they have Edey and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jay Huff and Brandon Clark, but as sort of a, like, Anthony Davis and Jaren Jackson Jr., that's a hell of a front court.
That's nasty. Yeah. I mean, you could even expand it with him to teams like, well, I was going to say teams. Like, what if there were a better free agent class? I would almost say like Brooklyn could just go a big two again. Just go trade for Davis and then use that cap space and get your second star. And here we go.
Hey, Jimmy Butler and Anthony Davis and a top pick. Done.
What could go wrong?
What about, oh my God, they just slipped my mind. What about him next to Wemby? He doesn't want to play center. How about that?
I mean, would he be a center there? I don't know. I guess he probably would. Yeah, that San Antonio is a team we haven't really talked about too much. I think we probably will as we get to certain players. I don't know.
Atlanta would be a team that I would say should go for it.
Like Dallas. Could Dallas do it?
You're talking about it, but you think?
I mean,
you think like how many rotation players are you giving up for Davis plus both your first round picks?
It's the Butler package plus 50% more, probably. Like I don't know how you.
I guess you don't feel bad about moving Kleba and Najee Marshall if you're getting back Davis. Whereas if you did that for Butler, it's all right. It feels like we like kind of nuked our like bigger rotation. But now if it's Davis, you're also getting into 25 first rounder gone. Your 2030 or 2031 first round or whatever it is they have available, that's gone. You're not trading. Are you trading Derek Lively for Anthony? No, right? Like, wouldn't part of the appeal be we're playing those two together?
Yeah, I guess so. You might have to if like the
Lakers do it then, because then it's Luka, Kyrie, and AD, and then who's your fourth best player that's left?
Are you
keeping PJ Washington, I guess, as part of that? There you go.
Sure. You're just cobbling it together. You're hoping like Jaden Hart. You're hoping a bunch of guys just can excel in bigger roles. I think we've exhausted the Anthony Davis trade. Okay, LeBron. It's all the same things, right? Is it just Golden State? Is that the only one we can send to?
There's no, and he doesn't. It's a different. Like, if I'm Anthony Davis and the Lakers aren't doing anything, I would personally ask for a trade. With LeBron, it felt like he went to the Lakers in the first place for reasons that transcended basketball. Mm-hmm. And that's unlikely to have changed in his age 40 season with his son on the team. And so I'm not saying he shouldn't be available, but I would question, aside from Golden State, what is the team that is giving up like, I could talk about teams that like he might be an interesting fit on, but would they realistically give you, I would say 2 first round picks or more? Like, if you're not trading LeBron just for a first round picks, unless you're doing him a solid. And if you are, guess where he's going? Probably the Warriors.
Yeah. I can't, I'm trying, anything else would be like such a stretch, like where it has to, like you would normally just throw a team like Miami out there, but like that's not going to happen. Not going back to Cleveland. So like we can rule all the typical LeBron destinations out. I just have no idea where he would even consider, like, I mean, he's not totally in control.
Houston, do they want him instead of Fred VanVleet? And then they're giving up picks, basically.
I mean, oh yeah. I think you're right that at some point winning a championship I mean, it's, you can't say it's not the most important thing, but it's not the only thing anymore. Like,
Yeah.
because if it were that were the case, I just don't think he'd still be with the Lakers, you know?
And it's just tough because I feel like he's able, because of his contract situation, the fact that he's LeBron, he's going to dictate where he goes more than, and I just don't see him. If he made a list right now, it'd probably consist only of Golden State, right? Would San Antonio maybe be on there?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, well, the list would have Golden State and then like a giant tier of like 17 other teams, I guess. But San Antonio would be one. I think that's
what
a
are
good
you giving up as the Warriors for LeBron?
I mean, the thing is that's funny is like Draymond is someone I'd feel a lot better about giving up for LeBron, but like they would never include him.
You're also, that's going to be, if you had to give Wiggins and Draymond for LeBron, your defense is done.
Yeah, I don't think you do that. I mean,
would you rather give up Draymond for LeBron than Wiggins, is what you're saying?
Well, that's a great. My first reaction is yes, because you could just use LeBron for all the small ball center stuff that you do with Draymond, and like the defense would just suffer no matter what. I think in an ideal, that's the thing with any Warriors trade is you sort of have to give up one of those two guys, like just to do anything.
Well, for someone making it, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, to do anything of consequence, one of them's got to go, and it's just always going to be Wiggins. I think, unfortunately, I don't know if that's the right decision.
And so knowing that though, and the other salary math involved, when you're looking at it in terms of Kuminga, Pods, picks, like the number of those things that you would give up for LeBron as the Warriors, what is the number? 2 more, less?
I mean, you could have. This is the wrong time to ask me, but I think Kuminga
it's like trade everybody,
all of them. Kuminga and Pods, just trade them for expirings or something. I think
that would. Well, I'll ask you this then: would you prefer to give up 2 first rounders or Jonathan Kuminga and Pods?
Probably Kuminga and Pods. I think
we've fallen a lot.
Well, I mean, the Pods, the two different. The Kuminga thing is just like I think he's probably gone. Like I think if you don't trade him, I think you're just going to lose him. And you can do the sign and trade, I guess, or no, you can't. You have to match. And Pod's just like, I don't know if that guy's going to have a career at this point. Like it looks so bad lately. It's like somewhere in between what we thought he was last year and what he is this year. But the floor and ceiling are looking very, very far apart right now.
Our next guy on the board is Herb Jones of the New Orleans Pelicans, who has technically been in the rumor mill because other teams are lusting after him. I do think, though, if we're going to have the Coby White discussion about, well, why wouldn't Chicago move him when he's not going to extend off this deal, which maybe you feel differently about Herb Jones because it runs a little longer and you're able to get him on this deal in the first place. But like Herb Jones isn't extending off of a $14.9 million salary grant, is he? Or do you think that he would? Because I do feel like if we're going to talk about, I know he has a little bit, he has 2 years left on his deal after this one. We're just sure that the New Orleans Pelicans are going to be good enough to pay Herb Jones $20+ million a year in 2 seasons?
I mean, I think something will have had to go wrong if he is extending off of this number, probably, like, because it's just such a good deal right now. And like, I'm trying to look at reasons. I mean, he hasn't shot it at all and he's missed a ton of time this year. Maybe I'm trying to think I'm trying to pin down, like, is his market value going to be higher if they wait?
His starting salary and an extent, like off that number in the final year would be $20.9 million. That's like kind of on the borderline, right?
Yeah, if he plays like this year, but I just don't know how to put any stock in anything that's happened in New Orleans this season. So like, I'm more inclined to believe that he's last year Herb Jones, where I mean, that's probably even he shot over 40%. He was 5th in Defensive Player of the Year. He's somewhere in between there too. He's like Pods. I think
I'm looking at it from this. He's in his age 26 season, so he's not like super young,
right?
If New Orleans is going the nuclear route of starting over,
then you trade him.
So I guess my question to you would then be, Zion Williamson is available. Doesn't that then count? And Herb Jones is being mentioned alongside Yves Missi. I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh. He's been good, but it's just funny to see him looped in there. Yeah. But Missi and Trey Murphy I get Murphy. He was just extended to the poison pill and he's not that much younger than Herb
No, he's
Jones,
like, he was an older rookie, but you don't change your mind on Herb Jones this quickly after an extension when he's looked good enough in flashes when he's been healthy.
So is that what you're saying? Is that's why you keep him?
Why I'd keep Herb?
Yeah.
I think no. I mean, you're
Oh, you were talking
hypothetical.
about Trae. I'm sorry.
You were getting me on board for Herb. Is if you're blowing it up, then yeah, because you could get that contract. The breadth of teams you could trade him to is wide. Like, and you can get the pick equity you're going to want if you're tearing this thing all the way down, or young players or whatever. Like, what could you get from Indiana? If you sent
do you think you get one of the youngsters and then 2 first-round picks for Herb Jones?
I think you're getting at least one of those guys and at least one first. Like,
right.
I just think that so, and that's not even, for any team that's thinking about Dorian Finney-Smith, any team that's thinking about Cam Johnson's a different player, but any team that's in we've got, a couple guys in the $10 million to $20 million range we can trade with a pick or whatever else. Like, you're in the Herb Jones business. And so that might be the argument for moving him. If you think as New Orleans that you're going to try to be competitive at all, like over the next couple of years, then I don't think you do trade him, because that's exactly the kind of piece that enables you to have a bad contract or two, or to overspend somewhere else or whatever. Because even if he's going to be closer to like his second year or even as his rookie year production, like, I think he's still just a bargain making what he's making. So if you're trying to win at all, you don't trade him. But if you're blowing it up, then move him. Yeah.
I would be curious what the vision is if Zion is available.
Well, I think he's just different because of the risk stuff that's priced in.
Well, I understand that then, but okay, so let's just say if you're not factoring in Zion, you're just saying, well, our plan, even though we couldn't figure out how to compete with more of a veteran roster, we're going to get our top 4, top 5 pick or whatever, and then we're going to be competitive to the point where it'll be on while Herb Jones is still on this good deal. I think Herb Jones is fantastic, and you could absolutely get 2 first-round picks for him, like 2 good. I'm not moving him for number 28 and then a good it's 2 good first-round picks or some equivalent at least. I just what is New Orleans doing? They look, and it's more so than the injuries for me, they look fundamentally, intrinsically broken.
Yeah, it's a mess, like across the board. I mean, like it's a lost season. I think we need to be careful judging, like, this is just it's like a Memphis last year season. It's like, what do we even take from any of this? Like, I don't know. I don't want to make
it's tougher with New Orleans because this feels like a more dramatic version of more of the same.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was I don't know. You can go back to when we used to just ask if are Ingram and Zion a good fit, and it was always just like, no, we don't think so. They haven't played together, but probably not. And so maybe that was the problem, is deep down, we all knew that this just wasn't a good enough core. I don't
expect him to be traded. I think it's tough because he does have like the extra time on his deal. So if you're New Orleans, I think by waiting, and if you were to move him over the offseason, you would probably get around the same because he has 2 full years left on his contract rather than 1. Mm-hmm. But you also do risk, if you hold on to him much longer and you're not going to be competitive, like, does this turn into an OG Anunoby situation where I think the package so far, well, I mean, RJ Barrett's been good, but Quickly's on this mega deal and has been injured a bunch this year. You do risk bag hold. Like, if again, you just said it, if you're not planning on like really going for a top 6 spot in the West next year, then this guy should be moved.
Probably right. And I do think, because the White situation, as you said, is analogous. If you wait until the 2026 trade deadline and trade him then, that would be the equivalent of the Bulls trading White at last year's deadline, right? When we agreed that, do I have it off by a year? Either way.
No, it'd be the equivalent of them trading Coby White at this year's deadline.
Yeah, which we just said they should. So I guess by that logic, when we thought that maybe the year to trade Coby White was last year, maybe the time to move on Herb is now, by that logic, if you think his value will be diminished. But we don't know that they're not going to try to win with him, Trae, DeJounte Murray, and
Cooper Flag,
Cooper Flag, whoever else.
Next on the board,
this is Josh Hart, Dan, and so part of this is like a process of elimination situation where if you're trying to make trades involving the Knicks and you don't think anybody really wants Mitchell Robinson and you're not willing to trade any of your other 4 best players, this is where you got to go. Is that how much of including Josh Hart here is just like, you can't trade Brunson or Cat or OG or Mikal Bridges, so this is just who there is?
Because aren't they in a weird spot to where I don't. Josh Hart's been good. I mean, they're better at both ends of the floor when he's off the court, but I think there's a lot of noise in there when you look at the lineups. He's spearheaded or been inside, but aren't they in this weird thing where you could like? Do you feel good enough about their core five to say like going up against any opponent? There's no way like they could beat the Celtics, they could beat the Cavs in crunch time, and on any given night, sure. But over the course of a playoff series, they feel like they need a significant upgrade to where you're not just getting a backup center or a backup wing and declaring this team a bona fide championship contender. It's almost like you need someone because of the way you've built your team where Cat and Jalen Brunson are like the tip of your spear on the offensive end, that do you need someone who's better to actualize the vision that you want? You need someone who's even better or more versatile defensively than Josh Hart in that closing group. And the only way to get that player would be to trade Josh Hart at the moment.
I was going to ask, like, specifically what type of player do you want back if you're trading Josh Hart? And it sounds like in a lot of ways,
Herb Jones.
Herb, yeah. Well, I was thinking like Hart's shooting just under 40% from deep. He's been all over the map and the volume has never been high, but he does feel like the guy defenses will leave. I know that's not what you're asking, but it's part of the same question is just like, who do you need as the fifth guy that is going to present defenses with more problems and is going to be a bigger defensive value add in a playoff setting than Hart? And it's just like a better Hart, right? Because you're not asking for like an on-ball star. You're not asking for like defensively, there's like sort of no limit to how good you want the guy to be. But like, I'm curious. So this hypothetical player from this hypothetical team is just like, why are they trading a better Josh Hart for Josh Hart? Unless you're
because you're attaching stuff to Josh Hart.
And so that's the question is, can the Knicks sweeten it enough to like, we're giving you a B minus level of a similar guy. You're going to give us the A minus guy. Do we have enough to make up that gap as sweeteners?
Well, that, or could you do something where it's then really commit to like go caps lock 5 out to where okay, let's just say they're consigned to having a gap year for whatever reason. Is Denver, because they're trying to expand their rotation long-term, considering Michael Porter Jr. for Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, that Washington pick. And by the way, I don't think the Knicks should trade Josh Hart because I don't know how you upgrade from him.
Yeah.
But I am skeptical of the idea, and this doesn't have anything to do with Josh Hart, that moving Mitchell Robinson, moving Precious Achiuwa is going to get you somebody that meaningfully moves your championship needle. You're more so just looking at, well, our regular season rotation will be at least a tad deeper. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter. I don't know how much it matters when Tom Thibodeau is your head coach.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I think we're kind of getting back to what my first reaction was, which is like, you aren't going to trade numbers 1 through 4 on the org chart. Like, and if you're going to do anything, and Mitchell Robinson isn't enough. So it is sort of like Josh Hart is here because it's like, he's the piece you could talk yourself into being like, not fungible is too strong a word, like expendable. Even that's even a stronger word, but like, it's just, yeah, like I just don't know. I guess if you could get MPJ, but the Denver side of that is like, no, thanks. I would assume that is the type, like just the dead eye. Like if you leave this guy, you've blown it defensively, schematically, and he's got good size and is just going to be someone that makes the Knicks offense impossible to defend. I think like that kind of, you need a premium skill. How about that? Like you need someone with the premium skill to offset all the varied contributions Josh Hart does give you.
Yeah, I don't. It's just that's a tough spot. But would you agree that like they probably can't get a lot better, and they feel like if you're gonna want to loop them in, I know where they rank in terms of net rating. I know what their record is relative to the rest of the East. They actually have one of the best point differentials in the league against top 10 point differential teams.
Yeah,
but I just can't put them on the level of Boston, Cleveland, or OKC. It feels like there's something or someone significant preventing them from being on that level. And I'm viewing this in terms of winning a playoff series, not just their regular season record.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm trying to like play devil's advocate, but you're right. Like they're not as good as those teams you mentioned, but that's a small group. And it might just be the case that like, you can't get that good. It's very hard to get that good. So trading, the last thing is like, we've seen a lot of trades that, so just thinking of like DeRozan in Sacramento, well, maybe, and I don't know, some of the stuff that's happened in Minnesota, where it's like just adding a more talented player does not always like improve the bottom line. And Hart does all of the other stuff that, like, whoever you get to replace Josh Hart might be a better shooter, might be a better distributor, but is not going to give you the transition stuff, the rebounding, all the hustle, all the on the margin stuff. So for a team like the Knicks, I wonder if, he feels like the weak link, quote unquote, or like the guy you could move. But I wonder if you would just not be able to make back all the marginal stuff that he does that good teams need too. Like, I think maybe what you need is to keep Josh Hart and just happen to have another giant salary to trade. So Josh Hart comes off the bench and just is like perfect in that role.
In theory, it's just, do they have enough to do that? Would be because Mitchell Robinson plus Precious Achiuwa gets you to like $20 million, let's say, and you have Pacome Dadier, you could trade that Washington first. Is that like enough to get that type of a player? And then maybe I just don't like, or not even a better player than Josh Hart, but an upgrade for the starting lineup. I'm not even saying a more variable option where it's, sometimes we'll start Josh Hart, sometimes we'll put a big next to Towns. If you're going to go that route, you just keep Mitchell Robinson and hope he gets healthy, because I don't know who you're necessarily getting for him. That would be eons better. It's just a tough spot. I don't think they should trade him either, but it's what you said. The process of, look, the power of friendship prevails again. The Knicks should not trade Josh Hart. 2 names here, Grant. Aaron Wiggins.
That'd be a good
and
player.
Isaiah Joe. They're neither of whom are trade eligible, by the way, until January 15th for anyone listening. They're basically just in here because Oklahoma City is so deep. It does feel like even their win against the Pacers, it was their offense felt too dependent at times on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I felt that way a bunch of times this season. And I don't know how much of it has to do with, we just haven't seen their full group together, like having Hartenstein and Holmgren and Jalen Williams along with Shai. And the other stuff is just Aaron Wiggins is playing fewer minutes, like, of late. And so it's, if he's going to average under 15 minutes a game or something, he's on this great deal. He's a really good player. Should you be looking to consolidate as OKC? Or is it just, if we don't think, like, what are you consolidating into? And so, like, we're not going to go make this home run trade, especially when we don't know what the deal is with Chet Holmgren. So we're just going to keep these guys who will still have trade value. There's no such thing as being too deep, but they have so many good players that it's, I look at Aaron Wiggins specifically as someone who I think should have a much larger role than he does right now.
Yeah. I think, like, this gets into sort of like some fundamental, I don't know, philosophical things to talk about with roster building, because, like, both these guys are very good rotation players. You could make the case that either of them could be a starter somewhere or on several teams, and their contracts are great. But, like, if you're a team at the Thunder's level, how many of that type of guy do you need versus do you need one more, someone that's in the conversation for being your, like, second or third best player, which is a super high bar on a team like the Thunder. But it's like, do you just need more star power at the top, which means you can play lesser guys in the same roles we're talking about with Wiggins and Joe? Or is it just better to have, 9-10 deep of players that you can throw out there and be like, he's going to be fine? And I think because the Thunder have, like, a pretty demonstrated now need for just another creator, probably like that's the type of player that you should probably be packaging up these really, like, good value contracts for, I think. And the question is, so you can get to, and you can add other salary too, but if it's Joe who makes just under 13 and Wiggins is like 10.5, so we're at 20, just say, call it 24 million.
And they can take back a shit ton of money. Okay. Too.
So who's the bet? Like, what are we talking about?
I was going to ask you, because I don't think that's a decision they would make midseason to go after the expensive shot creator type. I was going to ask you, would you trade one of these guys and Ousmane Dieng for Cam Johnson? Or is that not enough of a, I think I recognize that I'm way too high on Aaron Wiggins, because I would say no.
Okay.
But I'm just sort of like, if they don't, because we're talking about shot creators. If you don't think Aaron Wiggins is a potential, like, why are you going to think Cam Johnson is? Like, that's not the stuff he does in Brooklyn or in general.
I think you would just
we want another caps lock shooter to maybe try and offset the absence of only having, let's say, 1.5 to 2 top tier creators in a playoff series.
I think I think I would do that. I like Wiggins a ton, and he's a great 3-point shooter. And in addition to has added a lot of off the dribble stuff. Some of his drives this year have been really eye opening. But he is really a 2, and like I don't know. And Johnson just has more size. Not a great defender, but like, and is just going to get him up. Is going to get threes up. So I think Johnson is more valuable, but he isn't the type of player we were just saying they need, right? I think he could help.
I would do that if you're Brooklyn. Would you do? I think Jang and Wiggins. I think that the money comes close. You could figure it out from there. But like, is that a package you would accept? I would do it.
I need to pick more picks if I'm Brooklyn.
Oh, really? All right.
Yeah. Well, plus if I'm trading with OKC, I'm not going to start from the perspective of I don't need picks. I'm going to start from an outrageous ask price. Like, can we get like 4? Do you guys even like know where they all are?
Is there a name then that like a bigger name that would spring to mind that would check the box that we think they need to fill? Well, I guess you could argue just because you have J-Dub with Chet Holmgren coming back, that doesn't a caps lock shooter maybe potentially overwrite, not overwrite, but negate or overlap with, well, if you do this, it will make the shot creation easier on our secondary guys anyway. So we don't necessarily need to go after the caps lock shot creator.
That's the thing. Like, it's really hard. Like, so if you go get that guy, who's he closing over? Because you're going to have certainly J-Dub, SGA. Holmgren, you're going to have, I guess, Chet and Hartenstein. Are you closing with both of those two? I think you have to.
Right now? They probably wouldn't, given how small they're used to playing, right?
Well, but like if we are well, I guess it depends on the matchup, but like, why are we, it's hard to imagine in the conference finals or finals, you don't have those 4 guys out there. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but like,
I honestly, I had this discussion before the season started with the uncontested guys, and I don't know if we're ever going to find out an answer at this point to it. I argued they were less likely to close dual big than not.
Which means Chet is out there, right? Like, isn't Chet? I mean, I can't fathom. Can you imagine closing high-level games for them without Chet, given like what the space he occupies in that organization? I can't.
Well, that's not what I was arguing. I just think that Isaiah Hartenstein, sometimes I feel I'm not saying you're doing this, but I think sometimes are we clouded by just how much he's making? We're like, if it gave him $30 million, he's going to close.
That's in my thinking. I assume you pay that knowing he's going to close for you. I don't know.
I assume that you just paid that because one, it was kind of we're going to keep you from going somewhere else at comparable money. Like if New York had figured out how to get there with their early bird rights. And then 2, like this is the team option tax, whereas you got 2 years of guaranteed money, not 3. So that's how I viewed it. But you might be right.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. But anyway, like, what are you getting to? Because I guess maybe I'd say it this way. I think if you're the Thunder and you're making a significant trade, you're trying to find someone that's for sure going to close. And maybe that means like Dort isn't closing or something. Yeah, or if he is, then one of your bigs isn't. And that's a really high bar.
And I guess what's also kind of a high bar too is like because here's an example. Would they be a De'Aaron Fox team? Or do you need that shot creator to now have size? Because you look at, you have Casey Wallace and Alex Caruso and Shea. Like, no, you need someone who's bigger than, let's say, Shea, or at least the same size as Shea.
I mean, I feel okay with Shea on 2s, and J-Dub can guard whoever. So, but I would prefer size. But like, if Fox is available, like, what a massive swing that would be. Because then I can't imagine the Thunder have shot creation problems if they have De'Aaron Fox with Shea and with Williams and with Chet. Like that would solve the problem. In a perfect world, you want all the things and you want it in a like a big wing size player. But like, if I don't know who that is, if we're talking about guys that are even slightly available, I don't know how you do better than Fox.
Next up,
Scoot Henderson, our guy. Why is he not on the block? Is it because
the question is it too soon to?
Yeah,
he did just hit a game winner, so it's clearly too soon to give up on him.
And really, depending on who you listen to, he either has gotten no better at all or has shown flashes to, like, it's just really some eye of the beholder stuff with him based on, relative to last year, which was about as disappointing as rookie seasons get. I think so. If I'm Portland, I'm listening, but I'm not expecting the kinds of offers that I would want to trade someone that 18 months ago, year and a half ago we believed was a franchise cornerstone. Like, I just think it's too early for them to do that. But you definitely, like, he hasn't played well enough to where you're not picking the phone up when teams call, assuming they are.
So Scoot Henderson for Brandon Miller, who says no.
Is Michael Jordan in charge still when Brandon Miller got picked there? That's brutal.
Would you prefer to have Scoot Henderson or Jaden Ivey?
Oh man. I think I would probably rather have Scoot still, but if it were like, if we get to the end of this year and we don't see a second half, even then we'll be skeptical of it because Portland loves the second half surges from guys. Then it might be different, but I think probably Scoot. I'm giving Scoot more time, I think, before I pull the plug.
I'm with you, and I would like to see him with better spacing around him too. I think that could go a long way. Next, so this is here we are.
Here we go.
So latest, De'Aaron Fox. I'm sure you watched the post game interview clip, which when you watch it, some of the stuff he said, it wasn't bad. I'm with him. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter because you guys suck right now, pretty much. The rumors are that the news is that teams have basically circled him as the player to go, and he will be extension eligible again this summer. He could wind up getting over 300 if he makes an All NBA team, but he has one more guaranteed year left on his contract, and teams are watching. I haven't seen any reporting that the Kings are listening, but we know that Rich Paul did have a meeting with the Kings organization to kind of see where this is all headed. Given the state of the Kings, should they trade? It's not even should he be available? Is he untouchable? Do you think they should actually trade him?
I think the only way that should be a consideration is if, and this has not been reported, he's just like, it gets to a point where his play starts to suffer or the vibes get real bad because it's very clear he's like sort of done there. And I don't think you take that post-game media availability as like the kind of evidence you like. How do you want him to sound after his team has just blown however many games? They just can't win games late.
They are, Grant, in games where they're tied or ahead in the final 5 minutes. They are 6-8. Tied or there's no trailing in that. They're 6-8 when they're tied or ahead.
And they have 2 of the last 3 Clutch Player of the Year award winners, Dan. Can we just cite this whenever we talk about how just absurd the Clutch Player Award is and how unpredictable it is? So anyway, it's getting harder. We both, when we did this a couple weeks ago, said we thought the Kings would get better than they were. And like the fact that they keep losing these close games is like, I don't know that it changes my opinion. All the underlying numbers are, they're not super encouraging relative to where they were a couple years ago, but like they still win. They generally have a positive net rating. Like they're not a bad team. They just have lost close games and things can snowball. Anyway, I think that's the only scenario where you trade him before trying literally everything else. And that extends to DeRozan, Sabonis, like Keegan Murray. Like you probably fire Mike Brown, although they just extended him. Like, I think I try everything I possibly can before I trade him, particularly talking about this trade deadline, because you do have another full year to extend him. So like, that's my last resort is trading him, unless it's clear, like it's over, which I don't think it is.
I think for me, it would have to be he asks for out. And now it's okay. He really only has, if he's not going to sign this extension, he just has the 1 year left.
Right.
We need to make the move. What I keep coming back to, and I did mention this during the Jimmy Butler episode, but Greg Wissinger of the Kings Herald phrased it like this: if you don't trust this franchise to continue building around the group that they've assembled, why are you trusting them to then rebuild? Because if you're trading De'Aaron Fox, it's a rebuild, right? Like we haven't talked about that. You're not trading De'Aaron Fox and just changing the cosmetics of your team and potentially getting better or more well-balanced, correct?
I just don't know who you're taking back that, it's not like
you're going to trade De'Aaron Fox for Jimmy Butler and you're shrinking your window, but you think that for some reason,
or it's
worse
like
at shooting. Apparently
it's a different situation, but like the Halliburton for Sabonis trade, ironically, was like, well, we're going to be really different. But like, we're still good. It's just I don't see that trade where you're trading Fox for a very different type of player. Like Malik Monk's our lead ball handler now. Or we run it through DeRozan. Like, I don't know what you're doing, because what the team needs well, one, in hindsight, is probably not to make the DeRozan trade. And two, like a backup 4 and a backup 5 and like a wing defender, it needs like component parts to me. We can have a longer conversation about, can this function with just all these offense only guys? I don't know. But like, what you need is not like the thing you should be getting back in a Fox trade, right? So that's why I think you start someplace else other than trading him.
It doesn't kind of blow your mind that Domantas Sabonis is it just because of the contract situation that De'Aaron Fox, and we know that Clutch Sports met with the Kings, it's like, why aren't we talking about it then with Sabonis? Because he gives you limit. Like, so part of why their defense is, well, it's not so bad. Statistically, it's not terrible. They have to sell out their perimeter players to ward off shots at the rim because Sabonis is not a good rim protector.
Right.
And that then makes it harder to shoot gaps on closeouts or adequately contest 3-pointers. And it's not even that they're giving up the biggest share of wide open 3-pointers. It's just that it makes life so much harder on everybody else. And so, like, why isn't he the name? Is it just a trade value thing too? Or is it strictly the contract stuff with Fox?
I think, well, Sabonis is where I would start, because I think like the numbers are tough. Like 40 million this year, 43, 46, 40, almost 50 in the fourth year that he's got left. So like, I'd be hard pressed to, well, first of all, let's go back to when they signed with that extension. Like, where was the competition that was going that high for him? I don't think it existed. So I feel bad.
Need to renegotiate and extend him, unless wasn't part of the value. We said, well, then the deal is technically shorter because you're not letting him get the free agency inside.
I feel like I need to be careful talking about the Kings and Sabonis, because I've just been so broken record about, like, he's a good offensive player and it's seemingly like a great guy, but it's just like, he can't be a huge piece of a team that actually wins. Like, I don't know who's knocking the door down for him at that pay rate.
I agree with you that point, that I just don't. I even think with De'Aaron Fox having only one guaranteed year left on his deal, if you put both on the market right now, there'd be more suitors for De'Aaron Fox, and by virtue of that, you just get more for him. My counter with the DeRozan, how good can the Kings be with him on this team? This is now what? Is this year 4 or year 3.5 of the Sabonis in Sacramento, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Why have you not, the stuff that we're talking about, the components that you mentioned, this has been a need since day one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, what you did with DeRozan is you addressed one need. You wanted another shot creator while exacerbating others, right? Especially if you view Keon Ellis as the like human seesaw that you view him as, apparently. And I think that's the biggest criticism of the Kings is, why are we starting with the 2 best players on this team? And even like Keegan Murray, I hate to use the word untouchable, but like, you're not looking to move him. Like, why have you not done a better job optimizing what's around them? And you did it for maybe 1 year where you just leaned all the way into offense. But if you wanted to provide a more balanced attack, the way to do that is to not consistently field more one-way players or a shallower rotation. And that's ostensibly what they've done. And they've even, I'll argue a step further, this year, they've like, how many two-way players are on this roster truly? There is Keegan Murray, who has probably been more of a one-way player this year, but in theory, there's Keegan Murray. I think De'Aaron Fox on some nights or many nights is there.
Yeah, good enough.
And there's Keon Ellis. And now you've marginalized Keon Ellis without really leaning into the offense first. I mean, I guess the players that you're giving time to, okay, that does look like an offense first team, but it's not like you're first in offensive efficiency again. And so you used the word components, which was perfect. This is a years-long thing of just the front office actively looking at the roster and saying, like, no, we won't do this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, well, they did draft Davion Mitchell, but then, like, that's just another one-way guy. You know, you're not really addressing your inability to compete at the highest levels by adding a guy like him to the rotation.
And why did you, again, the injury stuff, whatever, maybe he'll end up being good for what this team needed. Why is Devin Carter on this team?
Right. Why not just take a shot at a wing that, you know,
or trade the pick?
Yeah. Or
like, instead of drafting someone else who's under 6'4".
So I think we should be, just to be accountable. Like, I now wish that I hadn't been quite so equivocal about the DeRozan trade. Cause like, your very first reaction is, that's dumb. They don't need that. But then it was like, for the price, why do you not add that level of talent and just hope they'll figure it out? And I think that's where we both ultimately landed, was just like, yeah, you do that, right? Like we're aware of it's suboptimal in a lot of ways, but if you can get DeRozan for what it costs, you should just do that. And now it really feels like maybe you don't, because he's so duplicative and he so has changed the way they play on offense. Like the threes are way down, which is like, yeah, that's going to happen. It didn't work. And I mean, honestly, we probably talked about this at the time, but when they could have traded Malik Monk, like you probably need to just trade him. Like, because now look where you are. Like, he's not something that there you go. We got DeMar and Malik on our next slide here. Like, can you move either of those guys? And if you do, what are you looking for? Like, who do you are we going to talk about Cam Johnson and DFS again? Like, is that where you go?
Well, it's interesting. I think you could still defend the DeMar, and we did talk about this, I believe. And I asked Greg Wissinger about this on the Kings Look Ahead, that does the DeMar DeRozan arrival portend that, well, Malik Monk, they're going to look to move him at this new number and hope to use him as more of a premier anchor. And that, honestly, that if you could get what you listed, a wing defender and another backup big or a combo forward without moving either of these two guys, let's talk. But you realistically probably, like, these are the two that I look at and say, well, why isn't it them plus whatever?
Yeah.
Like, is it a mega? Are they going after Jimmy Butler and then they're including Kevin Huerter and picks? That's where you start, I think. And even if you don't trust the Kings' direction, I would argue that's where you have to start, because unless Fox asks for out now, you don't get to play, well, we have to wait and see if he asks for out over the summer, so we're not going to do. No, you've done enough of doing nothing. This is where it starts. I'm not saying either of these two guys are the root problem. I said this when I talked about them the other day. They're a confluence of problems, of like minor to moderate problems that have now coalesced into something gigantic to where if the playoffs started today, they wouldn't even be in the play-in tournament. And that's I don't know the name. You've already said, like, are we just revisiting the Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith stuff? And those guys alone aren't going to fix anything. And should the Kings be taking a swing at a Jimmy Butler, who is DeMar DeRozan's age bracket, but you have to give up picks to get him in addition to what you already gave up to get DeMar, which really amounts to a swap and Harrison Barnes. So maybe it's not too much. I'm probably not looking at the mega trade, like go after Jimmy Butler. I don't even know what the other player would be, but this team needs to be more proactive somehow. Like, why? Like, we haven't heard them really mentioned with a Larry Nance Jr. And you know what? You get 0 points for recycling. But how often have they been mentioned with Dorian Finney-Smith, Kyle Kuzma, and Cam Johnson? Those are the names that have been brought up for over a year. I'm not going to give the Kings a pat on the back. Like, it'll be really cool on February 7th when we see all the stories about how the Kings like almost traded for the same three guys again.
Yeah. You know what they need? I guess I don't know if it's too far of an edge case, but like they need the PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford series of moves that Dallas made. Like that kind of thing would be exactly what would improve the team without like fundamentally altering the core. Now it's different because Luka's better than Fox, Kyrie's better than Sabonis. So you're just starting from a higher level from your main drivers of offense, but like get the combo forward that shoots threes and can guard 4 positions, get the backup big that's actually good. So you're not playing Trey Lyles and Alex Len and whoever else like that. And I like, could you would think you could do something like that with Monk or DeRozan as like the main outgoing salary, I think. Because what did Dallas just use a single first to pull all that off last year?
No, they used 2.
Okay, that's good. I think if you can do that, that's the type of thing you look at way before you get into Fox. But if you aren't going to do that, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, because you can't just start with the nuclear option. I don't think.
No, I'm with you there. Next up, I think this is our final player, Jeremy Sochan.
So the reason he could be on the block but isn't is that you just don't believe in him as an optimal fit with Wemby. It's a weird positionless thing. You like all the hustle, the defense, the way he attacks the basket, but is that actually valuable in a significant role? And might somebody else view him as like a more of a key? I don't know. Like, what do we think about him on the Kings, just for example, as like someone to play the 4 and run around?
Spurs are the Aaron Fox suitor, apparently. There you go.
Maybe we've just spoken it into existence. That's the thinking, right? Is you're just not sure of his fit. Like, why else should he be out there?
Well, it's that and the fact that he's averaging over 15 points a game this season. The finishing is probably the best of his career. So you're trading him I would say at the peak, given the level of responsibility he shoulders on the defensive end, probably at the peak of his value. And you're doing it because of what you mentioned, that you don't think that he's the optimal fit alongside Wemby. And just to that point, Wemby's effective field goal percentage with Jeremy Sohan on the floor this season is 48.9. When he's off the court, it's 60.9. These two, and the Spurs have won the minutes they've played together, but it's done mostly on the defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying trade him for draft equity, although myself, I'm more callous about this. I might consider it if the picks are good, but it might be more of a nudge of, can you do something that's a consolidation trade without making the home run swing? Unless De'Aaron Fox would be a great fit on the Spurs.
I love it. Yeah.
But it's Jeremy Sohan has not been bad this year, to make it clear. It's almost more intriguing to me because he's been good. I don't view him as the optimal fit alongside Wemby, especially if your end game is, well, we want Stephon Castle to be a huge part of this team as well. And you also have Devin Vassell, by the way. So yes, there is a positional void that in theory, Jeremy Sohan can still slot into, but I just don't think offensively he's built to play that role long-term in the Spurs to be the best version of themselves.
Would you feel differently if Castle right now were shooting like 34% from three, or, and you could, because I think the problem is you can't get away with, if Castle's going to be like a real questionable shooter, at least for the next couple of years, because you're already, I think if you're the Spurs, I don't know when you're going to peak with Wemby, but like, I think this year has shown that like, it's time to start thinking about like what kind of, like we could win 45, 50 games next year. Like that's like, you should probably expect that if Wemby is this. So you got to start thinking about like, can we put two non-shooters in a lineup next to Wemby? Like, and if the answer is no, I think certainly Castle's just going to be a starter forever. But Sohan then is coming off the bench as like a defensive specialist. And I don't know, like, do you want him for what he's going to make on his second contract in that role? That's just making another argument for, because it seems weird because he's in his age 21 season, has shown promise. Like, why are we talking about this? But I think it's because the Spurs are already at a point where you have to start thinking about how this roster fits.
Right, I guess. And if you're acquiring a De'Aaron Fox or just a bigger name, they've been mentioned for Jimmy Butler too. Sohan is a name that it becomes easier to trade because like that's just the collateral damage of doing that type of business. It becomes more fascinating if you're going the notch or two below, to where it's how many times has this name come up, but are you doing salary plus Sohan for Cam Johnson?
Yeah. That's
like the borderline name, right?
Right. It's the way I'm like hemming and hawing about it is like, okay, that must be a pretty good suggestion. Cause you would definitely think about it, but I'm not sure. It's because you're just weighing Sohan's like, I don't know, potential. Like what if he can shoot eventually, or what, like at decent volume, against Johnson being like what, 6 years older, almost 7 years older, but has the shooting skill that you sort of, I think you want next to Wemby. Like that's a bigger question, is like, can you just put offensive players around Wemby and trust that the defense will be great because he's there? Like what kind of team does it make sense to build?
And in someone's defense, like I do think the 3-point stroke looks better, but he's taking fewer and he's making less of them. He's at 26.7% this year. I guess I'm wondering, I would trade him for Cam Johnson. I'm trying to think of who the worst player is that I would consider moving him for. Is anyone on it? Like, what about a DeAndre Hunter? Is that too low?
I don't know. I mean, I think I probably, oh, that's tough. DeAndre Hunter's been so good. I think if we get to the deadline and Hunter is still doing this, I think I would definitely trade Sohan for him. But if he turns back into what he's been, I don't think you do that.
Is there any other, like, I'm just trying to think of like what would be the name of, I mean, I guess we came up with it, the Cam Johnson, DeAndre Hunter click.
Let's do a different type of player. Would you do it for Herb Jones, just to cite somebody else we've talked about?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But the Pelicans probably don't, unless we're in blow.
Would you do Sohan and a pick for Herb Jones? So let's say Jeremy Sohan and that Atlanta pick in 2027. I mean, you could give them 2025. I think New Orleans would prefer 27 just because they have their own pick this year. That's going to be really good. Do you do that? Who says no to that?
I kind of like that. I think if you're the Pelicans, you're getting a good first and a basically another first, which is what Sohan is.
I think the Pelicans say no, and the argument would be Herb Jones is the best player going out in that deal, and we're then hoping that the Atlanta pick turns into someone as good as Herb Jones.
Yeah, and Atlanta's like going to be decent because they don't have. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I mean, he's an interesting player because you could still talk yourself into being a really effective, maybe starting level guy on a good team. I mean, he's like sort of is that now. He's mostly been a starter for a pretty good Spurs team, but like, I don't know, with Wemby, you sort of always have to be thinking about like, can we aim a little higher, right? Like, can we step ladder our way to someone that's going to be, you know, a no questions asked, like he's part of this core. I think it's fair to be ambitious like that.
Grant, unless you have anything else to add, are you ready to take us out of here?
Yeah, I'm just happy we really fed the rumor mill. Like we should keep track.
We created it. You're welcome.
We concocted a rumor mill out of names that are not in it, except for Fox, which we'll see. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. Please remember, if you haven't already, rate, review, subscribe, subscribe on YouTube for sure. Leave some comments there. Mention anybody we didn't that you have the same feeling we do about how like
we didn't talk about Julius Randle.
Well, I think I'm a one-man crusade of bench him / trade him. I don't.
Well, would you trade? This is so. But
you're gonna bring up Julius Randle mid outro. Is that where we are?
If you're Minnesota, would you do Julius Randle for John Collins?
Oh man, wait. So, but what does that help me? I saved like $4 million this year.
But I guess if you're arguing as the Timberwolves that you didn't trade Julius Randle just because you think he's coming off the books,
yeah,
doesn't John Collins make more sense for what this team needs than Julius Randle?
I mean, actually, yeah, he kind of does. Maybe you get a pick. Well, why does Utah want Julius Randle? Just because?
Well, maybe they want to get the money off the books.
This is where we are with Julius Randle. We just whoever.
Also, I think Minnesota has like Detroit's second or something. So maybe you're getting a good second round pick plus Julius Randle, expiring money for John Collins.
What a world. What a world we live in.
I made you think with that one, didn't I?
Yeah, you really did. I was ready to say no. I'm about as low on Randle as anybody could be, but I was once there with John Collins. So I don't know. Maybe they just exchange problems, those two teams. Do you have anything else now?
Interrupting your outro.
Do you want to talk about a Dante DiVincenzo trade while we're on the subject? Rate, review, subscribe, do all that stuff. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. And we have to get out of here with a shout out to Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen before Dan comes up with someone else to discuss trading.